It is the afternoon of what day is it anyway? February 13th. We're on day 16 of the Alec Murdaugh murders trial. Back for the afternoon, which is fantastic. We are going to be starting with the cross-examination of the DNA analyst. So that will be interesting and a lot of fun. So we'll get that cross-examination and we'll see, are they gonna finish out the day with the medical examiner? We had a lot happen this morning. So I'm gonna give you a rundown as quick as I can on what happened this morning before court comes back. It was a very brief lunch break. So during cross-examination, yes, I'll be eating during some of the testimony. Don't worry, my camera will be muted. We are not a mukbang channel. I could never. I could never. I could never. But it's been 84 years since this trial started. And in the last 2 days, there's been some evidence and stuff, not just foundation, but evidence and stuff. And that's real interesting to see. So if you're new to me or my channel, you will find timestamps down below because replay crew, we love you. We want you to just get to the part that is most interesting to you. I'm going to give you a summary of this morning. So hopefully if you haven't watched the stream, I mean, if you want to go watch the stream, go watch the stream, but I'm going to tell you what happened. So if you maybe couldn't because they're long days, I get it. So let's do that. Hey there, I'm Emily D. Baker, the internet's go-to legal analyst, breaking down the legal side of the pop culture and entertainment stories we can't stop talking about. I'm a big fan of the cursey words. I've been a licensed attorney for over 17 years, but this is not legal advice. This is where the law nerds unite to talk about facts, not. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for those of you that are gifting memberships, and to the new members, we will be doing a members only live this week. I actually might be changing our members only live to the day court gets out a little early. So I'll keep you updated in your member spaces. To those of you that had said, show me your nuggies, not nuggies today for lunch because I didn't have time to cook them. So we are doing a typical trial lunch of cheese sticks, salami, and pretzels. That's what we're doing today. So that's about right. So with that, what happened this morning? First, we get into court and late, I might add, get into court pretty late because 2 of the jurors have tested positive for the vid. The 2 jurors that have been tested positive for the vid have been excused as jurors and replaced with alternates. They were not alternate jurors. They were seated in the 12 deliberating jurors. They've been replaced with 2 alternates. 1 alternate also left last week after having to go to the ER. So with that, we will also have, with that, we only have 3 jurors left, 3 alternate jurors left. The court did say that when trials become protracted, wink, wink, prosecutors, move it along. When trials become protracted, that this can be a problem. And he's not wrong. This trial has gone now. We are starting to go over the estimate. It was a 3-week trial. The judge had told the jury it should get to them on Friday last week. So we are now going forward into week 4 of trial. We know the prosecution should be done on Wednesday, but that's going to shift a little based on what happened next. And then the defense has about a week of their case. So this might go to the jury next Wednesday or Thursday. So it looks like we are actually in for a 5-week trial and then deliberation. So what happened next? What happened next? What happened next? Well, the prosecution would like to bring one other thing to the court's attention, and that's that GM has turned over the things that were subpoenaed a year ago that they never turned over. All the car data from the Chevy Suburban, all the OnStar information, how fast the car was going and when, the GPS coordinates of the car, all the things that we thought that the car should be able to tell you because it's got computers everywhere. And that they responded to the search warrant saying, we don't have that information. And then the FBI just went and got another Chevy Suburban and drove it all around to try to interpret all of the data using algorithms that they wrote or programs that they wrote or whatever computer science-y thing that they call it. They wrote their own key to interpret the data based on their own experimentation. And then GM over the weekend was like, oh, here's all the evidence. that you had asked for and subpoenaed, and we didn't turn over. And Dick Harpootlian had a whole moment talking about how appalling it was after GM was bailed out that they weren't turning this over. It's wild how GM was just like, oh, here it is. Oh, here it is. Bananas. Biochem girl in chat said, plus it took the FBI a year to crack the encryption. Yep. And GM was like, oh, here it is. Here it is. The court's wandering into, the judge is wandering into court with a large coffee. So now we're going to get the GM evidence in at some point before the end of the prosecution's case.
Ready for the jury?
Yes, sir. Very quickly, before we get started, just wanted to alert the court that after this witness, our next witness will be the pathologist. So obviously, I wanted to make the court aware and the defense aware, which they are aware, and the gallery aware.
This is going to be tough.
The graphic and sensitive nature of that testimony.
Thank you.
Additionally,
we'll put up a warning.
All those exhibits will be under seal, or we would request they be under seal to protect those particular images because of their graphic nature.
And Your Honor, it's
you've been warned.
I mean, they're extraordinarily graphic. They're autopsy photos, and so
those are sealed. Nobody needs to see them.
I are concerned that
they're sealed.
No display, whether anything. We're going to cover our monitors, but need to make sure no monitor is visible to the public. So we're just concerned about it. It's the kind of thing you don't want to see replicated somewhere else.
Yes, sir. Okay, very good.
They can deal with this sensitively. Bring the jury. They do not need to display these for the jurors. They can mark them as evidence and put them into evidence so that the jury can see them if need be. The jury just does not have to look at these photos. They don't need to. So if they are sealed here for years, the jury will see them. They should not be displayed in the courtroom. I've never displayed them. When I've dealt with coroner photos and autopsy photos, I have always marked them with the coroner, had the coroner explain if there were demonstratives that needed to happen, like trajectory rods, talk about those, and then let the jury see them as requested. I always try to be sensitive to the fact that sometimes hearing it is fine and they don't need any more. We will put up trigger warnings when we get to that witness. It is going to be difficult testimony. It will be somewhat scientific and neutralized a little bit, but it will be graphic. We know how terribly damaged these bodies were from the gunshots that they sustained.
Present, sir.
Very good. Thank you.
I know. Millie, yes, no one has been more graphic than Harpootlian's opening statement. These are facts. These are facts. Facts. So we are on cross-examination for the DNA analyst, and then we will hear from the medical examiner.
Good afternoon, Agent Zapata.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to try to eat my lunch now. This won't be terribly graphic. Why is everybody wandering?
We've gone through a pretty long list of things that you did analysis.
Oh, the wandering.
Did you do any analysis on any clothing or anything from the victims' bodies other than Maggie Murdaugh's fingernail clippings?
I analyzed Margaret Murdaugh's fingernail clippings, Paul Murdaugh's fingernail clippings, as well as their buccal swabs.
And when you say they're buccal swabs, that was simply to collect their DNA to perform analysis. Is that correct?
That was the known standard that I used to make comparisons. Yes.
Yes, the ME is testifying after lunch.
And under Maggie Murdaugh's left finger nail clippings, did you found unidentified male DNA?
Foreign to Margaret Murdaugh, there were some alleles present, yes.
Well, we say some alleles present. Was there DNA from an unrelated male under her fingernails?
We heard about the DNA under the fingernails potentially being CB Rose, but it was really more, it wasn't excluded.
For item 70, yes, one of the alleles indicates a male contributor.
And this was an unrelated male?
Do you mean unrelated as in unrelated?
Well, let me strike that and rephrase. Were Paul and Alec Murdaugh excluded as contributors?
Yes.
So male DNA under her fingernails, not from Paul, not from Alec Murdaugh.
The foreign DNA to her, yes, they were excluded as contributors.
She is doing a very good job of asking or answering exactly what she's asked. We know that that CB Rowe was not excluded. So
Would it have been possible to perform any further analysis on this, a Y chromosome profile?
It is possible, but because
Good
there
questions.
were so many male individuals who were related to each other as standards that were submitted, it was decided that that would not be
helpful.
the best course of action to continue analysis because
There were so few alleles.
The Y chromosome testing that you're discussing is inherited along the males of a familial line. And so there will be no way to distinguish between any related people, any related males.
And there was a lot of them. That makes sense.
I guess making this determination, were you all aware, we've had previous testimony that Maggie Murdaugh had been to a nail salon late that afternoon?
I did not have any information about that, no.
So if her nails were quite clean coming to Moselle, she doesn't have a lot of opportunity to have contact with
I think she got
unrelated males.
a pedicure.
Overrule the objection.
The proper objection is misstates
So if
facts
her
and
nails
evidence.
were clean coming to Moselle, it doesn't appear that she has much opportunity to have that kind of contact with unrelated males, does it?
It could be DNA, DNA under fingernails. You're picking up DNA anytime you touch an item potentially. If she did get her nails done, it's possible that somewhere at the nail salon, there was DNA that she picked up under her fingernails. We can't really tell you how or when the DNA got there, but at any point in time between getting her nails done and arriving home, she
Also,
could touch an
CB
object.
Rowe
and
helps with the
potentially
dogs.
DNA from the object could be under her fingernails, or she can touch an individual and their DNA be under her fingernails in that way.
For those asking why is it
Are you
important
familiar with something called
For the-
CODIS?
for the
Yes.
And
defense,
what is CODIS?
everything
CODIS
that
is
could be an alternate
a
explanation
database
is
that we
important.
use to enter unknown profiles
But I
from
think she just got a
crime to
pedicure. I don't
attempt
know if she
to
got a manicure.
identify links between different cases and also between individuals who maybe have been arrested or convicted of a crime.
So it's a database that you can submit DNA samples to and see if you get a hit. You can identify whose DNA it is.
Correct.
Was this unidentified unknown male DNA found under Maggie Murdaugh's fingernails submitted to CODIS?
It was not because, like we explained earlier, there were only 3 alleles present that were foreign to her, and that does not meet the threshold of information necessary to enter a profile into CODIS.
And it was
Also, if
decided
she's
not to do
unlocking
this
the
further Y
kennels,
chromosome.
CB Rowe also
analysis.
unlocks the kennels. There's a
Correct.
lot of alternate explanations. The defense wants there to be alternate explanations
Is it
because they want
unusual
it
in
to
your
not be
experience
Alec.
to
That's
not
their
test
job.
victims' clothing for DNA?
It depends on the situation of the case.
This isn't
A
that
situation
type
where
of
an
crime.
unknown person has killed 2 people in close
Is
point
the
blank
person
shootings?
really unknown?
It would depend on the question that you're trying to answer when you are processing the clothing. Typically, victims of gunshot wounds, their clothing will be saturated in their blood, or there'll be lots of their blood present. And so if you're looking for
It's just not
touch
helpful.
DNA from maybe an individual, we would need to know the specific area of interest to attempt to gather that touch DNA from, because the potential blood from the victims would be on the clothing. So we need to be
Overwhelming.
able to isolate a specific area. If that information is not known, then there's not very much that we can do with that clothing because there's just no specified area for us to test.
Which makes sense.
What about their hands? Wouldn't their hands always be a area of interest?
Depends on the case.
Again, it depends. If there is evidence of a struggle, then
he knows
perhaps,
this.
which is why we would take the fingernail clippings.
But this is them
If
doing
you
their
don't
job.
know,
He
then
knows
sometimes
this.
you take the fingernail clippings just to see if you can get some DNA from the fingernail clippings. But
And the one time something was taken from them, it revealed unknown, unidentifiable male DNA.
a very partial low-level profile for and to Margaret.
And you found Maggie Murdaugh's DNA on the 300
They're going
blackout
to
shell
have to have
casings that were recovered. Is that
CB
correct?
Rowe testify. Oh, that's helpful, counsel. Thank you for making it clear.
Are you referring to item 7.1?
Yes.
She was included as a contributor to that item, yes.
And your report doesn't separate between individual shell casings, does it?
No,
So if there was any
Is
blood
your
on those
report
casings.
consistent with one of those shell casings being found in physical contact with her body?
I believe there was information from the crime scene that
One of those casings
the
was
shell
under
casings
her.
was recovered from underneath her body.
Well,
And is your report consistent with that DNA could be transferred by physical contact?
That's possible, yes.
And for the shot shells found in the feed
he
room
very much
that had a presumptive blood test
tied
positive,
that up cleaner.
you found Paul's DNA on those, is that correct?
Paul was included as a contributor to that item.
She's
Yes,
not going
10.1.
to. She's not going to answer it the
And
way
is
he
that
wants her to.
consistent with those being found in a room soaked with his blood?
It would not be unexpected.
The shot shells weren't bloody though, but that was a good question because he's
And
narrowing
for
it
the
down.
steering wheel of the Chevy Suburban, there was a positive human blood test, and I believe you found Maggie and Alex Murdaugh's DNA on the steering wheel.
I think the defense has just made the results a lot more clear than the prosecution did at all. I don't know if that's good or bad for the defense, but
For item
they've made it more
56,
clear.
Yes.
for item 56, which was a mixture, was interpreted as a mixture originating from two individuals. Both Margaret and Richard Alexander Murdaugh were included as contributors.
Yeah, I like this
So,
defense
yes.
attorney quite a lot. I
They were
do.
included as contributors.
Yes. And is that consistent
good
with someone who
questions.
has handled Margaret Murdaugh's deceased body, which is unfortunately covered in blood, and then driving the vehicle?
I can't ever tell you exactly how the DNA was deposited onto an item. I
Could
can
be.
just tell you what the DNA profile
And I'm
is.
not asking you to, I'm just asking, is it consistent? Is there anything in your report that would exclude that explanation?
It's a possibility.
And for the two shotguns, neither one of those had Paul's DNA, is
Right,
that
it's
correct?
possible.
Can you give me an item number,
I
please?
can, sorry, just a sec.
I will switch to get our closed captioning back in a little bit.
The first one is.
I needed a break from the audio. Hurts my head. So
Item 15.
they're going through the Benelli shotguns.
Item 15 were swabs from the Camo Benelli 12-gauge shotgun from
answer this in a
receiver
break.
forward of the loading port, and Paul Murdaugh was excluded as a contributor to that item.
And the other shotgun was item 22.
She said excluded.
For 22.4, which was interpreted as a mixture originating from two individuals, Paul Murdaugh was excluded as a contributor. For item 22.5, due to the relatedness of the contributors, I was not able to offer a conclusion regarding Paul Murdaugh. So that's a situation that we talked about earlier, where sometimes if there's a small amount of DNA present, we cannot distinguish between related individuals. And so I was not able to make any comparisons
Because
to
we're dealing
Paul to
with
that
family.
item.
But you're not able to say for either one of those shotguns that Paul's DNA was detected.
He was excluded as a contributor for 22.4. For 22.5, I couldn't make any comparisons to him either way.
She's not going to answer it any differently than that, counsel. You can keep asking. You can keep
And
asking.
again,
It's not going to
is there
happen.
anything in your test results that would be inconsistent with somebody who with Alec Murdaugh having Maggie Murdaugh's blood on his hands, having just visited the crime scene and handling those two weapons.
Then where was the blood? Then where was it?
Again, I can't really say exactly how the DNA was deposited onto an item.
And then later you did
Because counsel's
some,
putting out
DNA
possibilities
testing
that are
on the white
possible,
t-shirt
but
he was
where
wearing,
is it?
correct?
Yes.
Did anyone ever tell you why you were being asked to perform those tests
Which tests do you mean?
on his white t-shirt?
The DNA analysis on the
So
t-shirt?
the DNA one, DNA.
It was submitted with a request to, for DNA for blood. And so when items come in with a request for DNA blood, we will test it. If it is presumptive positive, then we'll move forward with DNA analysis on that item.
So did anyone say, we believe he's wearing this shirt that night? Is that why you're testing it for blood? Just to see if that, right? Someone's asking you to do this work. Did anyone say, we think he was wearing this shirt that night during these murders, let's test it for DNA and for blood?
I know that the shirt was removed from his body when it was collected. As far as when he was wearing the shirt, I don't have any information about that.
We pull up what's been previously admitted as to.
No, they
Defense
don't
Exhibit
tell her.
32.
They say, can you test this? This is where we're looking for it. Can you test this? That's what they say. Can you test it? They're not going to say what they're looking for because, again, I think it can taint the analysis. How would you like to hear testimony being like, oh, yeah, they told me they thought this happened and then they thought this happened and then they thought this happened? No, she's a scientist. Can you look at this splotch and tell me what it is? And she goes, okay, it's this or that. It came from this shirt and this shirt came from this place. That's it. That's it. They don't need to tell her anything. Test it and tell us what it says. Not come up with an answer, not tell us who it could be. That's all. Test it. That's it. All right, I'm going to go to switch feeds to see if we can get to closed captions. Give me 1 second.
Okay. You recognize this.
They're asking, do you recognize this? And they're looking at the grid. Ugh.
This shows where the cuttings were made from the shirt, right? The A, B, C, D, E.
I'm not switching back
Yes.
because this grid's better.
And just kind of going through very quickly.
This grid's better.
Cutting A down here in the bottom.
Cutting A.
Did you find Maggie or Paul's DNA in cutting A?
This is so helpful. Thanks, counsel.
Cutting A
We've already gone through this.
is item 19.4.
Yes.
The sigh. The sigh. So
For
this is the shirt
19.4,
gridded out.
Margaret Murdaugh was excluded as a contributor, and Paul Murdaugh was included as a contributor.
So we have Paul in A. In B, did you find Maggie or Paul?
For item
Oh, show it again.
19.5,
There we go.
Paul was excluded as a contributor, and Margaret Murdaugh was included as a contributor.
No,
And
Paul.
For C, which is going up a bit, so now we're off the bottom of the shirt. Did you find Maggie or Paul?
19.1.
For item 19.6, again, I was not able to make any comparisons to Paul due to the relatedness of the contributors,
Because Alex's DNA was there too.
but Margaret was included as a contributor to that mixture.
Okay. For cutting D, now we're up at the right shoulder.
This is so much more clear.
Did you find Maggie
Thanks.
or Paul
Thanks, defense.
there?
For item 19.7, I could not make any comparisons to Paul due to the relatedness of the contributors. And Margaret was included as a contributor to the mixture.
Did you also find Nolan Tootin in D?
So Paul is
He was
too
also
closely
included as a
related.
contributor to the mixture.
Going over to the other shoulder, did you find Maggie or Paul in E?
So this is all a repeat of this morning, but
For
it's easier when we can see it.
19.8, Paul Murdaugh
So
was
E.
excluded as a contributor, and Margaret Murdaugh was included as a contributor to the mixture.
So no Paul but Maggie there. Now coming down all the way to the bottom, G.
Wait, why did we
You
skip
find
F?
Maggie or Paul
Why
there?
did we go to G? Why did we go to G? Why not F? Ugh. 19 point.
Paul was excluded as a contributor to the mixture.
Now finally, for both
Wait,
F
she
and
didn't get
H
to
up
finish.
here, did you get any results for either one of those?
For 19.10, Margaret was also included as a contributor. Sorry, just to finish that result.
Sorry.
This is much
You're
more
asking
clear.
about,
F and H, did you get any results for either one of those?
for F, which was our item 19.9, a DNA profile was developed, but due to the inability to determine the number of contributors, no further interpretation will be offered.
So no response.
For H, which is our item 19.11,
The
Paul
prosecution did
was
this
excluded
too.
as a contributor. And for Margaret, the comparison to Margaret, an uninformative statistical result was obtained. No conclusion can be made regarding Margaret Murdaugh as a possible contributor to the mixture under the list of propositions.
This is
Which in this case, the
repetitive.
propositions were
This is everything they
Richard
said this
Alexander
morning.
Murdaugh and Margaret Murdaugh contributed to the mixture
condensed.
versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture. And that's a situation I described earlier where the seesaw is balanced, so it can't tell me in either direction which scenario is a better explanation
So
of the
this is
DNA
just
profile.
a
So the
condensed
only
answer.
part of this chart that we see right here, the front, where you can say that you did find Paul's DNA is down here at A, the bottom right part of the shirt.
It's a good question.
Don't see.
But what they're saying is not that they're not saying Paul's DNA isn't there. What they're saying is that the DNA mixtures are too close. The father-son DNA mixture is too close. And because it's too close, they cannot say if it's Paul. So that's different because Paul is the son. It's very interesting.
For item A, I did have an inclusionary likelihood ratio for Paul. For several of the other stains, there was, I could not distinguish between him and other related individuals, so I could not make comparisons to him.
But the only place you definitely did find Paul was A, is that correct? On the front of the shirt.
Okay. But yes, this is presented in a much easier way than the prosecution because the prosecution has to lay all of the foundation. And he could be like, is Paul here or no? And she's like,
That was
is
the only item
included
where
or
there was
not
an
included.
inclusionary likelihood ratio for Paul.
And so it makes it much cleaner to listen to. I appreciate it. I'm so glad. Like, thank you for just putting up the grid and being like, here, 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 here. Thanks. That's it.
Do you remember when you did these, when you reported these DNA results? Do you know the date?
Whose phone is ringing?
Are you asking specifically
Yeah,
for
the date
the,
that you reported the results for the shirt, for DNA.
for the shirt? There were two reports that had the shirt because there were two times that it was processed originally. The first report, which had the results for item 19.2, was June 25th, 2021. And then the second report was originally issued July 25th, 2021.
July 25th, 2021.
June 25th
On July
and July
26th,
25th.
the day after, did you attend a meeting with President was Major Huey? I apologize if I'm not saying the names correctly. Captain Riley, Captain Reinhardt, Lieutenant Wallace, Lieutenant Schenck, Lieutenant Hash,
Meeting?
yourself, and Mindy Worley. Did you attend that meeting?
Meeting? Meeting? There was a meeting. Tell me about the meeting. I want to know about the meeting. Meeting.
Yes, I did.
And was the purpose of that meeting to discuss the DNA report?
Yes, it was to explain the results of my report.
Were you at that meeting asked to perform hemotrace tests?
Not at that meeting, no.
Okay. When were you asked to perform hemotrace tests on the shirt?
The defense is building out his theory of, look, you didn't have these answers, and then they kept telling you and pushing you to dig further. So this is not going to her. This is going to SLED as a whole, pointing
On August
the finger only at Alec.
10th, 2021.
And is that the day that you performed them?
Yes,
Yeah, I think you previously testified your test results were negative.
correct.
Tell us a little more how you
It's also
did.
locking
Let me
in a
ask it
timeline
this
of
way.
her
To perform
reporting.
the test, did
if
you
they
make
bring in the
smaller
blood spatter
cuttings
expert,
from
who's
the
a
larger
mess.
shirt cuttings?
Yes,
this is-
so
this is
I
fair.
took
Very
the
fair.
cuttings, opened them, and then cut small portions of the larger cuttings to test for hemotrace, and then place those cuttings into a solution, and then that solution is added to each individual card for that individual cutting. So there's a test performed for each item.
Cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting. Okay, got it.
I'm going to show you a series of photos, if I may, and ask if you can identify them. This is what's been previously marked, and the marks are on the back. It can be confusing. As Defense Exhibit 96, do you recognize that? I apologize.
Did you bring enough for the class council? That's just rude. Why no Codex
So you
search for
recognize
unknown
the,
DNA? She explained that there were not the,
And
there
that's
was
one
not
of the
enough
cuttings
DNA to
after
do
you
that.
made the small
So
cuttings.
that's why.
Can I see the other, it's hard to tell which was before and which was after without the other cuttings, because there's cuttings for DNA, and then I cut along the cuttings for DNA for the hemotrace test.
Yeah, I don't have before and afters to show you. Would it perhaps be helpful to look at some of the other ones? Would that help you?
Yes.
Rob, it would definitely be a,
I'll show you what's been marked.
it would definitely be a,
I'm going to read
trade-
these off so I can give them all to you at one time. If that's okay. That might help you.
Yes.
Been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 97.
I can't tell if Alec is looking at her or at the jurors.
98.
Jenna, P.S., which side do you think is winning? Generally, there's no winning in a murder trial. It
99.
sucks all the way around. Either somebody's convicted of committing murder or somebody's not, but either way, people have been murdered. But for me, I don't think we've gotten to the prosecution meeting their burden yet. So,
100.
but we're not done yet. We'll see. So that's kind of how I approach. That's how I approach it. For me, I don't
101.
know. I don't feel like prosecutors should try to win trials. They try to get justice. But yeah, that's how I view it.
102.
If that helps. It is absolutely the worst ASMR ever. And we can't see what they're looking at. So it's like difficult on the ears and boring. So that's tough. Thank you guys for gifting the memberships. I appreciate it. I can see them. I can't pull them up yet, but I can see them up along the chat. So thank you.
105. I believe it's the last one.
Prosecution table is bored with their own witness. Yep, they've heard it. They know it. They know what it says. They don't care. They don't have to hear the mic rustling like we do.
So now that you have them all, do you recognize them?
Yes.
And these are the
I love she asked
the larger
for all of
cuttings,
the items.
the smaller
She's like,
cuttings.
no, I need to see all of it.
I know that we took photos before the cutting was taken for hemotrace and after. It's hard to tell from these pictures if it was before or after, but they were taken during the hemotrace processing of the shirt.
Okay.
going to try to answer questions as we go. Still stuck on why AM didn't react to his wife's missing wedding ring. I didn't
Your Honor,
see
at
his
this
face in
time,
court.
I would offer defendants exhibits 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, and 105.
I don't even know if they tested Maggie's phone.
They're admitted without objection.
Elizabeth said,
Commissioner
I
Publish.
hesitate to say, show me your nuggies. We already talked about what I'm eating for lunch. Didn't
You
even,
don't need my permission to publish anything that's in evidence.
I'll do that at a break.
Go get the whiteboard, please.
By chance, if he's innocent, look, he has the presumption of innocence. So that's where we're at now. Having to watch video of probably the worst day of your life is just sad. I'm also having cheese, pepperoni, and crackers. Look, cheese, look, here's the thing. I feel like my generation is heavily influenced by Lunchables. We love a charcuterie board. I love a little round piece of salami, some cheese, and crackers. I just dropped my cheese. Damn it. But we are a Lunchable generation. Look, my parents
So
wouldn't let me
this one,
have
it
one.
looks like you made 5 cuttings.
So now I
is
make
that
my own.
correct?
So some of these cuttings were originally taken for DNA. I tried when I cut for hemotrace to also cut along where the cuttings were taken for DNA.
Okay, but there's 5 there, right?
Yes.
The next one?
They are Lunchables.
Yeah, let's see if we can
And
count
yes,
how many
I
are
bought
here.
Capri Sun. I will go get one at some point today. I bought Capri Suns yesterday. I couldn't not. They had lemonade ones, and I got them. So for those of you asking, I am on the ex-millennial cusp. I am a zennial. Not on the Z-millennial cusp. Those are my kids. Well, actually, my kids are a little younger than that. They did not
Were you able to count
have
how many?
pineapple.
It looks like 14. It's a little hard to see the very small ones. It's hard to tell
It looks like
on
14
the small
cuts.
screen.
If you're not sure, don't count it. So 14?
She said it looks like 14. She didn't say it was
That
14.
don't
Those are
look
teeny,
bad.
teeny little cuts. They're very small cuts. Hold on. They're very small cuts.
It looks like 14.
Okay. Next exhibit
I wish I could make this bigger. But these are very small cuts.
here.
Those are bigger cuts. I pulled the other feed so we could see the cuts better from the shirt.
Next one.
The purple are the presumptive blood tests. So
7.
Okay.
this has some of the pocket on it. You can see the pocket writing down at the bottom and a little bird.
9.
The next one.
Seven.
7.
I see all my other
Next exhibit.
zennials in the house. We're right on that bridge between ex-millennial. My husband is all Gen X.
Looks like 9. Again, it's a little hard to see.
That's a lot of
And
cuts.
be conservative. Don't
One,
count
two-
if you're not sure.
1, 2, 3.
The next
That
exhibit.
one has 4. I've got it. 4. That one has 4. I see
4.
it. 4.
Next one.
4. 4. Kelly's like, I'm smack dab in the millennial. You're 88. Yes, you're smack dab in the middle of millennials. There's lots of us zennials in here, though. Uh-oh. On the other millennial cusp is the zennials
9.
with a Z, not the zennials with an X. They're just going through all the different cuttings she took of the shirt. Maybe to show the jury, like, how could you test anything that small? I don't know. They're so little. 2, 3,
2.
but at least we get to see exhibits today.
That's it. Those are all of them. So now we'll just add these numbers up. I have a calculator. That will help.
Oh, they're adding numbers. We're doing maths. They're doing maths in court as the prosecution is chugging
So we
coffee.
have
Why?
5
Why are we doing math?
plus 14 plus 8
She has a
plus
calculator.
2
God bless her.
plus 7 plus 9 plus 7 plus 9 plus 4 plus 9. So what's the total?
Try to make it look like a reach.
74?
74. And in your test, on none of these did you detect human blood with hemotrace. Is that correct?
For all those cuttings for the different items, they were all put together into that tube for that item. And for all of those tests, the result was negative.
So we're 0 for 74 detecting human blood here.
Good question.
The result was negative.
That's a fair question. 0 for 74 on blood. And her
Moving on, then on
response is,
August 16th,
the result was negative.
to discuss DNA results or outstanding DNA reports.
That's fair.
Yes.
Were these results discussed at that meeting?
For that meeting, we were discussing the items that were, that still had pending DNA assignment, so that they had submitted for DNA analysis, and we were waiting to see if that analysis was still required.
Look at the 0 for 74. He just left up on the board facing the jury. Look at that. Just
There's
casually
nothing
back
in
behind
the
him.
discussion about those
It says 0 for
results being
74. Clever. The defense is
discussed. I
defending
don't
today.
remember anything else about that meeting.
Let me ask this. Who asked you to perform the hemotrace test on August 10th?
There was the request for the hemotrace result was relayed to me by my supervisor.
Oh, yeah. I don't think the lack of blood is the flex they think it
Lieutenant
is
Laura Hash.
at all.
And on August 10th, did you
At
relay
all.
to Lieutenant Hash the results of your tests?
She was actually the reviewer of my hemotrace test. So when we perform card tests, there needs to be a second analyst to review the card test and sign off on the review of the test. So she was present when the test was performed.
Okay. Cool. We've got a long way to prove the shirt did not have blood on it.
In 2021, were you ever informed that SLED was seeking a blood spatter analysis of the shirt?
I was told after the shirt had been sent that it was going to be sent for
Oh,
blood
shit.
spatter analysis, but I don't know anything about how that came about or where it was being sent to. That was once I was done with my analysis.
When you say after the shirt was sent, what do you mean by that?
Or however they did the blood spatter analysis. I know that there is documentation that the shirt was being taken for that in the narrative, but I
They are
don't
trying to push
know
the
how that
prosecution.
came about.
They are trying to
And
push
at
the
that time,
prosecution.
I guess I'm a little confused. Were you aware at that time that it was being sent for blood spatter analysis?
Not until it was already sent.
And by sent, you mean that somebody had asked for the report to be made, or that the shirt had physically been sent somewhere?
I don't know anything about how the blood spatter analysis came to be. I don't know what they required for that
Could you just
analysis.
tell me a date, the first time you learned that there was going to be a blood spatter analysis? Even a month, if you don't know the exact date?
I really don't know because it didn't have anything to do with
Your
me or
job.
my analysis.
This is great
When was the
questioning.
first time
This is probably
um,
the best defense.
your
cross
hemotrace
we've
test
seen,
appeared on a report
I think.
that you issued?
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. The defense
The
is
report
pushing.
with the hemotrace results was issued on November 10th, 2021.
Were the results for the blue raincoat also on that report?
Yes, they were.
Did you discuss the hemotrace test results with anyone working on this case?
Kelly, I'm sorry for the loss of your Ponard. Those are always devastating. And I'm sure they were incredible and their memory will always be
I don't
warm.
think that I discussed it with anybody else. I don't think so. I would have discussed it with the person who reviewed the results.
Did you
Oh,
discuss
Sara, we're
the
gonna
blue
get back to that.
raincoat results with anyone investigating the case, any agents on the investigative side?
I know for the raincoat, I was asked to give an update on when the results would be issued. Once I developed the DNA profiles for those items, the DNA profiles were
All right,
technically
it's good to see
reviewed.
you.
And then
I'll take you up
I
on a
was able
charcuterie board.
to
My weekend was
make a phone
wild.
call to relay those results. And I was able to speak to Agent Gent and just give him the preliminary results for the items from the raincoat.
But you did not discuss the hemotrace results that are on the same report?
There's some really good questions in here. Allison
According
said,
to my notes,
I'll
I
get to
only
it.
updated him on the findings from the raincoat.
Let's move ahead then to March 22nd of 2022.
we know in this case they asked for
I
blood
just
spatter
said that you were aware
way
at
at
some
the
point
end.
that a blood spatter report had been
Way
requested.
at the end.
Were you aware in
So after
March
DNA.
that one had been received claiming that there was high velocity impacts blood spatter on the shirt? Were you aware
Interesting.
of that report?
I didn't really know
Interesting.
anything about the report or the results of the report.
Now the jury's going to wonder why the fuck they don't
So
see
you
it.
weren't aware of it in March
Smart.
2022, is that correct?
I don't know when. Really do not remember when I was told or what. I know that I didn't really
Pay
get much
attention.
information about the report or when.
Okay, well, moving a little further then, on April 11, 2022, the
He
Attorney
got what
General
he needed
requested
from
a
that. He
meeting
doesn't need her to
that
know. He needs
occurred
to
on
ask the
April
question.
20th, 9 days later to discuss reports.
That is a good question.
Yes,
And in preparing for that meeting on the 20th, did you access your November 10 report on April
It's a
18
good
and April
cross.
19, a couple days before that meeting?
Yeah, this is a good cross-examination. The jury's going to be left wondering, or the
did I look at the
prosecution's going to have to
report in
bring it.
preparation
Yes.
for the meeting? I would have reviewed the reports in preparation for the meeting, yes.
Could backfire
At
though.
that meeting, was
It's unlikely.
there any discussion of blood spatter?
Ooh. These questions aren't hearsay because
I do not
she's an
remember.
expert. He's allowed
This
to
is the-
ask an expert about
The first meeting
opinions
with
on
the
other
AG's
things.
office after the report is received saying.
And
that
if they
there is blood
object, it makes
spatter.
it look like they're hiding something. He is
Was it
But that had
discussed?
nothing to do with my testing,
He
so I
boxed the
don't
prosecution into a
really
corner.
know.
Did you notice
Good.
that 6 days
Smart.
after that meeting, there were media reports that high velocity impact spatter had been found in Mr.
Oh,
Murdaugh's
that's
t-shirt?
objectionable.
I tried very hard to not look at any media reports involving this case at all, so I tried to avoid that information.
Smart.
Well, at some point, did someone come to you and ask about the hemotrace test results that you performed that say no human blood, 0 for 74, in relation to this report
Good,
saying
good
that there
cross.
was blood spatter that had to come from a gunshot
They can't
on the
object.
t-shirt?
At some point, I know that we discussed the
There's nothing they
hemotrace
can object to
results
at this
on the
point.
shirt.
And when was that?
It probably would have been in the meeting where we went over all of the results of my reports. I know that we had several meetings to discuss the results of my reports.
Any idea when that was?
This is a very good cross-examination because now the jury is like, oh, DNA? What DNA? because now they're like, what's a blood spatter expert? Why haven't we heard from the blood spatter expert? Why does this witness say that there's no blood on a hemotrace test and somebody else says there's high velocity blood spatter? There is now an unresolved question in the mind of the jury that I don't think the prosecution can resolve, and they can't really object to it because then it looks like they're hiding stuff. And they can't hide stuff. They have a terrible expert that they might not want to call.
That April meeting was the first meeting after that report was issued.
And the defense might try to block them calling that expert.
We had a discussion about the reports.
So they might not even be able to call that expert, even if they want to, which would further make it look like they're hiding stuff. It's a good cross.
In the same meeting?
Possibly, but I don't know that. I also wasn't present for all of the meetings all of the time. I know there were some times when there were meetings with specific individuals first, and then I would come later. So I don't remember if there was specific discussion of blood spatter there when I was present.
It's so good. It's such a good strategy. This is probably the best strategizing we've seen from the defense. This is a great cross. They are using the state's expert completely to their advantage
Exhibit 95,
to put the prosecution into a corner.
Yes.
And there's nothing the prosecution can do about it.
It
except
is
sit
a
there
memorandum to
and
the
take
file
it.
for this case.
Oh,
And you're the author of this memorandum.
this is great.
And it concerns hemotrace and it relates to this case?
Yes, I was asked to do some research into the scientific literature to see if there was information about hemotrace and potential effects of other kinds of testing prior to hemotrace, as well as list some reasons for possible negative hemotrace results.
Now they're trying to backpedal and see why there might not be
Exhibit
blood.
95 into evidence?
Oh, that's not
Says the
evidence.
state.
No objection, Your Honor.
Submitted without objection.
What? We're just memos to
We
file are
actually
just
write this,
evidence now?
memo.
What
Yes.
world of
Yes.
evidence are we in? And
Creighton Waters asked for me to do this research and
But
then summarize
they
my
can't
findings in
object
the form of a memo.
because it's their
Did he
witness.
tell you why he was asking you to do this?
Because there were negative hemotrace results in this case from the shirt, he wanted just some more information on negative hemotrace results.
Was it specifically because of the report saying high velocity impact spatter?
Oh,
I don't know that.
Was that discussed when he asked you to do this?
We discussed the negative hemotrace results on the shirt.
Did you discuss a report by a man named Tom Double?
Rob, right? Rob,
I don't think
I don't
we
know how
specifically
this has just
discussed the
happened,
results of that report
but the
because I don't
prosecution
know.
can't object because it's
I'm
their
not a blood
witness.
spatter expert.
And it makes
I
it
don't know
look like
anything
they're
about
hiding
what
something.
that report would say or what
The defense has
findings
just
in that
flipped this
report
to
would
their
mean.
expert. It's
I
so
just know that
crazy.
there was a report.
It's crazy
and then
shit.
I was asked to give some more information on hemotrace.
Oh, Jerry, this witness,
Were
you are so right. This witness
aware
is
of a
so
report by
uncomfortable.
Tom Bevel specifically regarding
Oh,
use of
shit.
hemotrace on things had been previously tested with LCD?
I was made aware of a report like that after I had already, obviously it was after my analysis had been complete. I don't remember specifically if it was before or after I was asked to write this memo.
And you attached some articles to this memo, correct?
Yes, I attached the articles that I found regarding hemotrace so that all that information would be present in the memo.
And this first article from the Australian Journal of Forensic Sciences,
How is this coming in? How is this happening? That's not evidence. Oh my
I'm not
God.
characterizing it correctly to say that it reports that
These
hemotrace
states did
tests
not
are
prep their
generally
witness.
effective after treatment with LCD.
Oh boy. This isn't evidence. This isn't evidence at all. So, but she's relying on it and she's an expert. So here we are. Oh my God. They're going to get all this in because the prosecution can't object, but they should, but they can't.
For that article, there were many tests performed comparing testing hemotrace after the use of
Oh, the jury might be
several other
just
kinds of
fucking
tests
sleeping.
beforehand.
But I'm dying.
Their results were positive following LCV for 17 out of 17 tests with a blood dilution of 1 to 10, and for 16 out of 18 tests with a blood dilution of 1 to 100.
So it usually works, Hematrace, when you're testing something that had a presumptive test with LCV.
Smart.
Right, it shows that it did work the majority of the time that they tested it, but they did obtain 2 negative results as well.
Out of how many total?
Out of 17 plus 18.
Okay. So it didn't work 2 out of 18 times?
No, it did work 2 out of 18 times. Counsel, you're inverting it.
Turn this on.
She's doing the math on a
Of the
calculator.
35 times they tested it, they obtained a positive result 33% of the time, according to the article.
sorry.
33 times, sorry,
So
according to
since
the
you have a
article.
calculator, what's the percentage of that?
Okay, so here's what they're saying. This shirt was tested with LCV, which is a presumptive test for blood.
It looks like
then
94%.
it was
94%.
Hematrace tested.
And here we're 0 for 74.
And she was saying that sometimes,
On the next article,
LCV
on
can
page 4 of
impact
the next article, there's a
Hematrace.
little chart.
but the
You
defense
see
just
what I'm
got her to
talking
say
about?
94% of
Which
the time
article?
if there's blood, it will
The
show.
exhibit, the second
Smart.
article, page 4.
Smart. I'm dying. Okay, look, as much as I loved Camille Vasquez's crosses because they're great, this is a fantastic cross-examination of an expert. A fantastic cross-examination of an expert. And we'll go up there with, for me, with Camille Vasquez's cross-examination. This is so well done. The
Am I
jury
reading
might
this
be
chart
checked
correctly
out.
to
but I am
understand
here.
it to mean that Hematrace detects blood at dilution levels in which LCV would not detect blood?
According to this study, which was performed by the Michigan State Police,
But now everybody cares
they
about
were
blood and
able
they've
to obtain
completely forgotten about the
positive
DNA
Hematrace
results. Smart.
um,
Smart.
for
so
some
smart.
samples that were negative LCV.
I'll talk about blood spatter at the break.
The Hematrace test is more sensitive than LCV, at least according to this study, correct?
Look
It
at his
appears
face.
to be, accordher to this study.
I love that
LCV
his-
is not a chemical that I use
I love
in
that his
the DNA
pacing
casing
hasn't
department.
gotten
It
too
is a
Fast.
test that's performed by the crime scene unit, so they would be the best people to answer questions about sensitivity of that test.
He is having a great cross and he hasn't sped
According
up.
to this, you would get a positive
And a
result.
lot of
even
attorneys,
if
when
you
they get
couldn't see
excited because
anything
they
with
are
LCV.
killing it,
According to the previous study, after LCV, 94%, and here we're 0 for 74. Is it fair to say that there's
the 0
no
for
human
74 is
blood
all the jury's going to remember.
on the T-shirt?
Like I said earlier, the test that I performed was negative for
is
the
so
presence
good.
of human blood.
They could object to outside the scope and they haven't even thought of
We'll
it.
pull up 32.
It's so good.
This will be very quick.
Rob said, how are we here now? The questions are completely exceeded. I don't know. They don't even know. They don't even know. The prosecution doesn't even know what to object
Zoom in on
to.
the pocket.
They should have considered this. This is so funny.
Sorry,
He's
I
doing a
have
great cross.
image
They
of
could
the back
object,
of it.
but also the
I believe this is name
prosecution
of a
has to
fishing boat. There's a
decide.
fishing boat on the back of the T-shirt. Were you aware when doing this, this is a fishing T-shirt?
What?
No,
Have you ever gaffed a fish?
What?
I don't even know what that word means. No.
Well, let me ask it this way then. If someone were doing something while wearing this T-shirt that would cause non-human blood to spray onto the shirt,
Good
could
question.
that be a reason why something would have a misting pattern with LCV and test negative for Hematrace, 0 for 74?
I can't really answer anything about the misting pattern because that is not my area of expertise, but one possibility for a negative Hematrace test is that the blood present on the item is not human blood, because Hematrace is a confirmatory test for the
And
presence of
that
human
is
blood.
what they wanted.
It also reacts to ferret blood and higher primate blood.
Not fish
Does
blood.
it react to fish blood, does it?
No.
It's a good question.
Did you attend an evidence viewing meeting on January 5th of this year?
I don't know what gaffing a fish is either. The witness, yeah, Rob is right. The witness is now the defense expert. They have absolutely made this expert a expert that's friendly to this defense, in that they are using her knowledge and expertise in a way that is helpful to their case. But also, she's a neutral expert. She's not an expert that's like, I'm here to do this or here to do that.
Yes, I did.
Was blood spatter discussed at that meeting?
I know that we talked about the results of the shirt. As far as blood spatter, again, I'm not a blood spatter analyst, so I cannot give any information about blood spatter on an item of clothing or on anything.
Specifically, were reports by Tom Bevel discussed at that meeting?
I really do not recall.
Even though it was just this month, well, last month.
Counsel,
last month.
she said she doesn't know.
Yeah, it's hard to remember specifics.
Reports by
That's not a great
Deputy
answer for
Kinsey
her.
discussed regarding blood spatter.
She's like, not my job, I don't care, is basically where it's at.
I
Not my
don't
job.
recall that name at all.
Was the T-shirt discussed?
She's like, not my job, not my problem.
I don't remember the exact items that were discussed specifically.
This is so far outside the scope. They could object to outside the scope. I don't know why they're not. Maybe they forgot they could. But now, if the prosecution now has a tougher decision to make, because the jury's heard that there is a blood spatter expert.
T-shirt,
Yes,
and that's fair, right?
yes.
Put a lot of work into this T-shirt. There were the little cuttings in the beginning, the small ones in the hem, right? And then those are tested with
Phenolphthalein.
right? And then DNA tested. All of these large cuttings, we haven't even gone over, there were a couple in the back of the shirt as well. These small cuttings, then you went back and made more small cuttings for the hemotrace, right? Lots of work, and then you're doing this big memo about hemotrace because of the shirt.
Now evidence, the memo that's now
A lot of
evidence.
work, and
It's
this
so
is going on
crazy.
for the period
It's
of
happening.
June 21, the month of the murders. It looks like all the way up until a month before trial. Is that fair?
Well,
Work on the shirt.
my analysis was complete before that, but
I
And
mean,
they
you're
keep
doing this memo
asking.
to file because of the shirt
They
results, correct?
kept asking you.
yes, correct.
So, I mean, so for all this work on this shirt, it appears that the theory was that he was wearing that shirt that night.
Same.
Finally. They should have objected way sooner. The defense got so much in that's
Just
not
ask, maybe
necessarily
the meetings that you've attended where the
evidence.
shirt was discussed, and blood spatter was perhaps discussed.
Nope.
Was
These
there
are
ever any discussion of a blue button-down shirt?
danger.
Not that I recall.
Never discussed? Okay. But the court's involved.
That was a good cross counsel. You should probably you should just sit down. Just sit down. The redirect needs to be very, very limited. I wouldn't indulge any of this shit at all, because they have definitely put the prosecution into
I
a
know you said
corner
it's
with
not
this.
your area, but are you familiar with the term high velocity impact spatter?
Objection calls for speculation outside the scope of
Not
direct.
really.
You
No
know what that
foundation.
is?
Excuse me, counsel.
No, I'm not a blood spatter expert.
Would you think that you could have blood spatter without blood?
Thank you.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Oh, the jury's heard it now. She should go flip over that 0 for 74. She should flip that right back over and take it down. Oh, good. A lot of defense attorneys would leave that up and make the prosecutor move it, because that was a powerful exhibit for them. Demonstrative that 0 for 74, there's no blood on the shirt. But this has put the prosecution into a corner with the blood spatter expert, and it was
When you
smart.
analyze something, do you try to be thorough in your analysis?
Yes, I do.
I don't think that's a
And are
try.
you aware that before you analyzed this shirt, that there were presumptive positives for blood?
Yes.
Okay. And then when you analyzed the shirt with the hemotrace, what were your findings?
The hemotrace results were negative.
All right. The defense also asked you about touch DNA. When you analyzed those cases and shot shells that were found at the scene, what were you analyzing those items for?
I just want to know, and nobody's asked, if you wash a shirt, could it come back negative for blood but still have the DNA on it? Nobody's asked. So nobody's asked.
For item 7.1, the request was for touch DNA analysis. For items 9 and 10, the request was also for touch DNA analysis, but because there was staining on the swabs when Rachel Wynn did her processing, she presumptively tested those swabs and they were presumptively positive for blood, and so they were forwarded for DNA analysis.
Why didn't you cover that in
Touch
direct?
DNA on items like that, would you be looking for possibly whoever loaded those items into a gun?
Yeah, it is.
Whose other DNA could you be looking for when you're analyzing those cases for DNA?
Typically, when cartridge cases or shotgun shells are submitted for touch DNA, we are looking for DNA of an individual who may have handled those cartridge cases or shotgun shells.
And is it common
This
to
witness is playing
find
with her rings a
touch
lot.
DNA on fired cases or shot shells?
In my experience, there's not been a very good yield of DNA on those items. From my understanding, when a bullet is fired, it is being put through a lot of intense heat as it's moving through the firearm. At least that's how firearms analysts seem to explain the process. And so the heat can affect the recovery of DNA from that item.
And also with touch DNA,
So it looks like there
do
was
you know when
Paul's
touch
blood
DNA?
on the shot
gets
shells at
something?
some point.
No, I can never say how or when DNA was deposited on an item.
Just sit down. Just leave the
So
rest of it
if I
go.
shook somebody's hand at some point in the day, could I have their DNA on my hand?
It's possible, yes.
And you would know when that got there?
No.
Now, do you determine what evidence is analyzed in a case? Do you look at all the evidence and pick and choose what you're going to analyze?
No, we are requested to analyze items of evidence.
So it's a request for you to analyze evidence.
Correct.
Whoever requested for you to analyze the clothes of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh?
I was never requested to analyze those items.
And do you analyze items that you've not been requested to analyze?
No.
Thank you.
Very briefly, Your Honor.
No.
You're asked about touch DNA. Is it common to find that touch DNA on an object when that object is discovered touching a person?
Can happen.
Can you repeat that question?
If an object is found actually
This
touching
is a
a
big deal
deceased
for them. That's
person,
interesting. Why
would
is
it
that
be
a big deal for
uncommon to
them?
find that deceased person's touch DNA on that object?
No.
And would it be uncommon to find a wife's touch DNA on a husband's shirt?
She's not going to say how it got
It
there.
would not be uncommon, no.
No further questions.
Step down.
All right, we're getting to the medical examiner next.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can go to the jury room for a break.
I'm
Please
gonna-
not discuss the case.
Okay, they're going for a break. I'm going to take a moment to say, oh, everybody stood up on the jury left this time. Interesting. I'm going to take a moment to say the next witness is going to be graphic, but a lot happened in that cross-examination. I don't think the judge will have anything to put on the record with them. Apparently, we're taking the afternoon break. That was a really interesting cross-examination, y'all. That is the best defense attorney, I think, in court on this defense team, and I can see why he does a lot of the expert testimony. That was a very, very good cross-examination, because what it let me swoop and talk about why I liked that cross-examination from the defendant so much. So let's go ahead and swoopy doop. All right, swoop. Here's what happened. We went through the DNA expert on cross-examination with a brief redirect and a very brief recross. But what the defense did was take that DNA expert and introduce a lot of things into the mind of the jury. Somebody tested this for blood spatter. Somebody tested this for high velocity blood spatter. If you're on the jury, you're just like, high velocity blood spatter. Tell me more about high velocity blood spatter. But what we know from the defense motion, and I covered the defense motion earlier on, the shit show that is the prosecution's blood spatter expert is likely going to introduce all of the doubt in the world if they introduce that expert. He was testing things in his kitchen or in his freaking garage. It was so loosey-goosey and weird. And then we have the first presumptive test for blood saying blood. Then we have the hemotrace saying no blood. And then apparently you get back to the blood spatter expert saying there might be blood. But if the hemotrace says there's no blood, but the LCV says there is blood, what this defense attorney just introduced is that in studies, when there's an LCV test and then a hemotrace test, 94% of the time, it doesn't impact the results on the hemotrace. The LCV test that goes first doesn't impact the hemotrace test. So for the fact that they are 0 for 74 to come in front of the jury and to sit there and stare at them and to say there's no blood, this is 0 for 74 on hemotrace, then to bring in a blood spatter expert that says, no, I think there's hemotrace. The prosecution can't throw their DNA expert under the bus. They need the DNA expert. But how do you get to these different results other than saying, see, the prosecution's reaching? They'll find any expert that'll say anything about anything. They have now put the prosecution into a corner with regard to blood spatter. Because if the prosecution doesn't bring in the blood spatter expert, some of the jurors are going to be like, but why? But why? But why don't we have the blood spatter? They said there was blood spatter. She knew there was blood spatter. Why didn't it come in? So it's just a very, very interesting thing. And this witness cannot testify regarding what is and is not high velocity blood spatter and whether or not high velocity blood spatter would even test positive on a hemotrace test, because that is not her area of expertise. So they introduce doubt without introducing answers, and they still have a pending motion to keep that expert out for the prosecution. And that prosecution is the expert's worst expert. So now they've allowed it to just sit. And the jury's like, why isn't there blood? If I'm the prosecution, I'm still leaning into the absence of the thing is the problem. And I'm not even leaning into the blood spatter at all. I'm not touching it. And if the defense wants to bring it, then the defense can bring it. But then the prosecution's going to have to be skilled enough to make those defense experts their experts. I would still lean into the absence of the thing. But that's why it was such a good cross-examination. Because what the defense did was got a 94% of the time. If you have LCV test and then a hemotrace test, the LCV doesn't counteract the hemotrace. Sometimes it does, but 94% of the time it doesn't. And that's what the jury is going to take away. Once we got all the DNA. Woo! So y'all, I have a video breaking down the breaking down the blood spatter expert and the defense's motion regarding the blood spatter expert. So you are welcome to check that out. I will go find it. What is going on? One of my feeds just switched. That's so odd. Hold on. Give me 1 second. I got to go find my other feed to make sure that court doesn't come back without us being there. Because I need to make sure that we're there. We're going to be there when the judge goes back. So it's an interesting thing. We still have doubt in this courtroom, I think. But it doesn't mean the jury hasn't already made up their mind. They're not supposed to. But if the jury already hates it, they're sitting there going, don't care, hate it the most. Stop asking her questions. We heard the DNA. So we'll see. Or they're just like, this makes no sense. It's a fishing shirt. I don't know what gaffing a fish is. Shut up. That's possible too. I thought it was a great cross. And for those of you that are very interested in trial strategy, that cross-examination, I think, was a great example of masterful trial strategy. Whether you like the defense or not, that was a very, very good cross-examination for the defense. Will it be enough? I don't know. But the prosecution needs more. This is a circumstantial case, and the defense needs to be able to pick away at the strong evidence. DNA is very strong evidence. So what did the defense do? They said, okay, the DNA is here, there, and everywhere. Fuck it. And then they moved on to using this witness to talk about hemotrace and blood spatter experts that this witness really has no idea about. So they distracted very well. And that is really the job of the defense in a criminal trial. So after the break, we are going to get to the medical examiner, but let us get to all of your questions. Max Bang says, other blood like chicken blood puts him at the kennels. No. Well, no, she said it wouldn't test positive for blood unless it was ferret blood or upper primate blood. So no, chicken blood's not going to count. Emily, I have questions. Hey, Sue, did Buster get kicked out of USC Law School for cheating? That's what's been reported. And I've heard the jail calls where they discuss it. Did a family friend, Butch, get paid to use influence to get Buster back into USC Law School without the consequence of cheating affecting his GPA? They tried to do that, but he did not return to law school. So yes, there are jail calls where Buster is discussing that with Alec. Yes, there is. Eric said, police video, go back 10-ish, gone, 1.5 hour equals 8:30. Didn't see them for 45 minutes, 7:45, all lies on the video at 8:45. That video that came in that we looked at before lunch was very, very interesting. So it definitely is him trying to distance himself from seeing Maggie and Paul that night, which again, might be enough for the jury. They might be like, look, the absence of blood is weird. The absence of blood is weird when you said you were at this very bloody crime scene, touching people, taking their pulse and everything else. So the absence of blood is weird. And then you have him lying about the time. And then you have him asking Miss Shelley to lie about the time. And then you have him asking Blanca to lie about the shirt. And then these lies start to add up. And the jury, if the jury's like lying liar that lies, they might not care. They might not care about the excellent cross-examination we just saw. So Madison asked, can you explain the Patreon versus YouTube membership? Yes, I need to put a video up on the difference between the two. We have other levels of member exclusives over on Patreon with different options, including the members only I Have Thoughts podcast. On YouTube, you get the 1 level. You also get the gavels and you get the time benefit when we have slow mode on, which is often because our streams tend to be very large and I want everybody to have a chance to talk, and it cuts down on spam. So there are different benefits to each of them, and both get the members only live streams, both get the behind the scenes of the podcast recording. So it just depends if you want that members only podcast and more of a place to chat. We are working on getting more of a community tab up there on Patreon, so there's more of a place to interact with the law nerds. So that the courtroom needs an invisible fence that will shock the lawyers when they pass the podium. Yes, Your Honor, may I approach the witness? The honor has to push the button to make sure that happens. That's not a bad idea. The wandering lawyers I find terribly distracting. I don't know how the jury does it because I find it terribly distracting, and we're watching from afar. Scent boosters and hang drying makes your clothes smell fresh much longer. Put new dryer sheets in your stack of clothes to keep the scent even longer. Serenity says, if I get this right, Alex's clothing only had his wife's and son's DNA on it. Shouldn't his mom's DNA be there since he sat on her bed for a while? Sorry if you address this. We did not see any DNA from the places they tested for mom. So it's from the places they tested. We did not see that. And we didn't see Miss Shelley or anyone else he might have interacted with, including all the other lawyers that came to the house and were hugging him. So we didn't see that either. But there were 2 other DNAs, CB Rowe that was Maggie's fingernails. There was one other DNA that was questionable that had a name attached to it. I have to go back to my notes. Half an hour ago, they posted a video of him going through the garbage and found a circled Gucci purchase on a card bill. Oh, so all those videos, we'll go to them afterwards. It sounds like all those videos are finally getting released, the redacted videos. Was there more guns in the shed that night? Why didn't he just grab one instead of driving back to the house? There were no guns up at, Nolan Tootin. Yes, Nolan Tootin. There were no guns up at the kennels. So there were no guns up at the kennels. Eleanor said, my car company knows when I need an oil change, where I'm parked, and how much I spend at the store. I mean, same. Who's the man who sits right in front of the witness at the desk? He has a laptop. Thank you. Carrie, I will have to look when we get back to court. There's the judge, and then there's court staff in both sides. And then there are the court reporters. And the court reporters have been changing out day by day. Amanda said, I've always wondered, what if you don't swear? What if you don't want to swear on the Bible like they're doing in this courtroom? Can you refuse and just raise your hand? I have not seen anyone refuse, but those are regional specificities in at least Los Angeles County and elsewhere in California where I've worked. They don't have a Bible in court. They just have people raise their hand and swear. So it regionally varies. I think somebody could. Whether they would in this community or not is different. I don't think they would. Tara said, well, I take the stand. I don't think he should. It'll be a mess if he does, but who knows what he's going to do? I mean, would I have thought that a very prominent attorney would have stolen from all their clients? Nope. And that goes for him and Girardi. Nope. Sure wouldn't have guessed it. So who knows what he'll do? He shouldn't. He doesn't have to, and he shouldn't. The right to remain silent only works if you actually remain the fuck silent. It doesn't work if you don't exercise the right. Astania, I think I pronounced that right. Astiana. I think that's probably the right one. Did you see my super chat from this morning? I saw most of them. I didn't get to answer all of them. Why did he say only two trier tracks are his if he got there, saw they were dead, left to get the gun and come back? I don't know. His tire tracks don't make any sense to me. And the fact that there's a lot of tire tracks up there doesn't make any sense to me. But it doesn't make any sense to me that he would be like, no, just these two, because he did drive around. Was Maggie hosing down the kettles? His DNA would be on it. I don't know who was hosing down the kennels. I heard water, but also if they were hosing down the kennels, wouldn't you see the food bowls and stuff put up on top of the kennels and not down where they were when the police got there? Because food and dog beds and stuff were on the ground. So those would have been put up if they were actually hosing down the kennels. Or I don't know if they were hosing down the area where Bubba had the chicken. I don't know. I heard water. Linda D asked, have you ever served for jury duty? I've showed up to serve for jury duty. And then they get to the point of, where do you work? And I tell them, and then they're like, bye. So I've been yeeted. I have never served on a jury. Mustang Mickey, question Emily, in the second interview by police in the car, Alec was wearing a green striped seafoam shirt. I've not seen the video of the second interview. Is that the shirt Blanca said he was wearing earlier that day? I have not seen the second interview video. I've only heard the audio for the second interview. So I'd have to look. But no, Blanca said he was wearing a solid work shirt, like a seafoam work shirt. So Maggie, targeted property for sale, Paul, some other person, perpetrator excuse. I don't know. You told your husband that you were going to meet that day, didn't you? I don't know what that is in reference to, FD. I did see a number of people asking about the manicure. I don't know if she was getting a manicure or a pedicure or both, but for those of you that asked if she was getting a manicure, it could make sense that her rings were in her pocket and then fell out in her car. My mom lost her wedding ring after a manicure. People do lose, take off, if you're getting a manicure, take off all of your rings, put them in your pockets. And so you could sit down in your car and they could fall back out. Absolutely, absolutely possible. Question. What would a blood expert tell us that the DNA expert didn't? Well, a blood spatter analyst could talk about blood spatter and whether this shirt was worn when somebody shot somebody. But if the prosecution's going with the angle of he didn't wear this shirt, he changed his clothes, then why even bother? Are testifying witnesses allowed to ask counsel to stop wandering around if it's distracting? Kind of. We saw it with the battle of the wills between this last attorney that we saw and Attorney Tinsley. So Attorney Tinsley kept saying, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. You were looking down. Oh, I'm sorry. What was that? You were looking down. So it was back and forth between the two attorneys of some kind of weird pissing match about whether or not the attorney was looking down while reading a question or not looking up. So you could say, I'm sorry. Can you ask your question again? I was distracted that you were wandering, or I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. You were all the way over there. It depends on the witness. It depends on their level of comfort, and it depends if they like the attorney. It really depends. When witnesses are pissed at an attorney, you can tell. Question, when is an expert allowed to use notes and when not? They can't read from their notes. They can rely on hearsay, though, but they can't read that hearsay into the record for the truth of the matter asserted. In this court, it seems like everything goes. I mean, they've got things in evidence that you would never see admitted into evidence at other courts and jurisdictions. It's wild, and both sides are doing it. JR made the point, I take my wedding ring off for a manicure every time. I don't know if she got a manicure or a pedicure. Persephone said, it's definitely the Lunchables. I very much prefer a smorgasbord style of eating, even if it's only a bite or two of a dozen different things. Same. All the things. Rob said, oh my God, EDB, I forgot to tell you, but on point, my friend asked me to make a shark-shaped cutting board and engrave charcuterie in the corner, and I haven't stopped laughing since. Rob, you need to sell those immediately, because there was a whole bit of like TikTok realness with the charcuterie versus charcuterie, and I need a charcuterie board too. That's hilarious. All the chat all wants charcuterie boards, but it's just hilarious. It looks like they're coming back into court, though we don't have audio yet. Are we going to bring the jury? We're going to bring the action? But it's very funny, Rob. Thank you. I love it. And I want to see a picture. Put a picture on Twitter. Question, have they found any chicken blood yet? Nope. Rob, this is great. What is the prosecution hiding from you? This is wild. It was a great cross. It was wild. It might not impact the jury at all, but the lawyers are all shook. You can't unring this bell. Jury is going to wonder why the prosecution isn't showing splatter. I think so too. We'll talk about blood spatter more. Can you explain what makes the state's blood spatter experts so bad? I have a whole video covering it. It's not good. And they know, the defense knows the state's expert is a problem. And I think the defense wants to use the state's expert to show that the state is overreaching. Because question, will you release your notes after? My notes? Cassie, are you talking about my notes? My notes end up in the form of QuickBits videos. I wonder if they are just prepping the courtroom for the medical examiner to come in. And that's what they're doing. All right, let me turn off this audio. All right, chat. There is going to be graphic testimony of the medical examiner. Just know there is going to be graphic testimony. YouTube is going to get pissed at some point. Just be aware. If you get kicked out, you might have to go search for a link. And we will just put up a warning. Mods, we don't need to constantly do a warning. I'm just going to pin a warning when we get there. I'll just pin a warning, but this is your warning. This is going to be graphic testimony. It will not be in a sensationalized way, but they are going to talk about all the things. So just a trigger warning. If you are not comfortable with that kind of medical testimony, it is going to be a lot. Lauren said, psych on Nancy Grace suggests ring hidden under car mat suggests it was a prop used when with AM. I mean, it really, the thing is that there are two reasonable explanations. He said, bring the jurors. There are two reasonable explanations. And one of those is she took her rings off to have a manicure and it fell out of her pocket. And one of those is they were about to get a divorce and the marriage was crumbling. But without more, the jury's going to have to lean towards the reasonable explanation that doesn't point towards guilt. Misty said blood doesn't just disappear. Not with those injuries. It's like a big pool of blood is just missing. Well, it's not on Alec Murdaugh. I don't get it. Why does the blood matter if Alec's DNA was found on the shells? It wasn't. Why is the blood so important? Well, the defense is making the blood spatter a red herring, and the prosecution, I think, is going to argue the absence of blood, but they can't have it both ways. I don't think the prosecution was clear on their theory of the case ever. I still don't know if they're clear on their theory of the case. And I think that's why we're getting the spaghetti on the wall approach from the prosecution, but that is the approach for the defense. Spaghetti on the wall is not a clean prosecution. You need a beginning, middle, and an end to tell this jury what happened. It can't be we don't know, but he lied about where he was and he lied about how long he was there. That's not a beyond a reasonable doubt prosecution. That is you don't know and you never should have brought that case. So we need to get to what is the theory of this case clearly, and it is not there yet. What I do
Thank
know
you. Your next witness.
is that the medical examiner
Your Honor,
will
the state calls Dr. Ellen Riemer.
will be graphic testimony. Mandy Matney says high velocity spatter is not blood. Has this been misreported? I mean, it is blood, but it's missed, so it might be so fine that it doesn't test on the hemotrace, but we don't know that. The prosecution seems riveted by their own expert's testimony. I think they were riveted by how off the rails it got during that cross-examination. All right.
Adjust the microphone if you have to. State your name again for the record.
I just don't know if they go by coroner, pathologist, or ME, so I'm gonna wait.
Hi, my name is Dr. Ellen Riemer, Riemer.
How you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead
She
and
seems so
get
pleasant.
right to it. And if you would, just tell the jury a little bit about your education that led up to you becoming a physician, please.
Yes, okay. Well, I graduated from medical school in 1997 with a Doctor of Medicine degree. Following that, I did a residency in pathology at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Columbia University Medical Center in the city of New York. Following that, I did a forensic pathology fellowship
Well, she's
at the
much
Office of
more
the
personable
Chief
than
Medical
most
Examiner of
coroners.
the state of Maryland.
So there's that.
Following that, I did an additional fellowship training year at Johns Hopkins Hospital, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, also in Baltimore. And I am board certified in forensic pathology and anatomic pathology. After I completed all my education and fellowship training, I took my first job as a forensic pathologist at Wake Forest University Baptist Medical Center, Wake Forest University School of Medicine in North Carolina, where I remained for almost 6 years, but before being recruited by the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, where I've been for 14 years as a forensic pathologist.
All right. And at the Medical University
Much more
of South
personable than
Carolina,
most.
you said you're a forensic pathologist. Do you have any professorship or teaching responsibilities there?
Yes, so I have also the title of Professor of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine. And because Medical University of South Carolina is a teaching institution, I am responsible for educating physicians in training as well as medical students. And that's an integral part of my job. So a lot of the work I do is observed by students and trainees.
And you mentioned you had some board certifications. Can you tell those to the jury, please?
Yes, so, in order for somebody.
Yeah, that's why she's personable.
The American Board of Pathology is the organization
Much more
that
than most coroners.
certifies specialists in different fields. And
A lot
the
of
American Board of
pathologists
Pathology certifies
are not-
specialists in
Are
pathology
not this
and
personable.
requires them to take very long examinations and demonstrate and pass those examinations. And you can't just sit down and take them. You have to have achieved, gotten through your residency training and fellowship training as well. So
I feel like even
I
though we
managed
have
to do
some
all of that. and I'm board
I
certified
feel
in
like
forensic
even though
pathology.
we have some really difficult
And
testimony
do you
coming
have
up,
any membership or
like
involvement
her
in any
a
professional
lot,
societies
and
that
I
are
feel
relevant
like
to
she'll
what we're
be
talking
delicate
about?
with it.
Yes, well,
and I
member
appreciate that.
of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and
I just
I also
appreciate that.
am responsible for editing journals. I have various academic responsibilities as well.
Do you
And you
sleep?
mentioned editing certain journals. Have you published in the field of pathology over the years, given your professorships and your educational
Yes.
expertise?
She's board certified.
Because I'm interested in, educating the medical community. I published close to, I don't remember the exact number, but approximately 30 publications
Ma'am, that's a
in the
lot.
fields of pathology and forensic pathology.
Ma'am,
And this is also something that's valued at an academic institution. So you're
Ma'am.
not just practicing,
She's like,
but
I don't know
also
the number. It's
contributing
30
to the body
whatever.
of knowledge in your field.
ma'am.
Over the years,
Can we
in
be
this,
less humble?
Experience, have
Can you
you
just be
had
like-
called to conduct a number of autopsies?
Yes, so the principal
got all the things.
responsibility of my work is to perform autopsies on deceased individuals in order to determine the cause and manner of death. And over the course of my career, don't keep exact track, but I estimate that I've done approximately 5,500 autopsies.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all.
Correct.
All right, we'll talk more about
She's
what
like
autopsy
somewhere
is
over
in a minute.
5,000 folks.
Over that course of time doing 5,500 autopsies, have you been qualified as an expert and testified in courts of record?
Hundreds,
in
I'm
the nation?
sure.
Yes. So again, I'm not keeping track of every single one, but a conservative estimate would be approximately once a month for more than 20 years, which would put me in the mid 200, so
200s.
about 250.
Of course it
But
is.
that's probably a little bit more than that.
She's like,
And that's times you've been qualified as an expert in forensic pathology?
Yes.
all.
And is that just in South Carolina or there have been other places?
Yeah, the majority have been in South Carolina, but
She's
also
published-
North Carolina.
She's a professor. She's
where I
board certified. She's
practiced,
done like
for 6
5,000
years prior
autopsies.
to moving to South Carolina. And I've also been admitted as an expert witness in forensic pathology in federal court a couple of times where I autopsied individuals who died on tribal lands.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to qualify Dr. Riemer, Professor Riemer, as an expert in
Yep.
forensic pathology.
Yep.
Objection, Your Honor.
Yep.
She's so qualified.
She is so
Hey, Dr.
qualified.
Riemer, before we get to
Like
your
so-so.
specific findings in this case, can you quickly describe to the jury what is pathology and what is an autopsy? What is it that your science and being a physician, what are you trying to do?
Yes, so the purpose of an autopsy
She knows
is
exactly what
to,
she's going to say because she is.
obtain as
done
much
this
information
hundreds
as
of
I
times.
can from examination of the tissues of the body, and in order to come to a determination of the cause and manner of death. And the autopsy examination is basically a specialized surgical procedure. It starts with an external examination, so before any cuttings get started, I
Okay.
look from head to toe. I look for anything unusual. If there's injuries, I review them. I look at them carefully and document those findings as well as
There were hand,
establish an opinion
hand
on how
motions.
injuries may have occurred.
there were just
And obviously, because in
Okay.
cases where you have traumatic
Okay.
injury, there's no getting around the fact that it's very graphic, the things that you have to look at and the things here today that you have to describe to the jury.
Yes, that's just part of it.
Did you have call in this particular case to examine the victims of these murders, Paul Murdaugh and Maggie Murdaugh?
I mean, the
Yes.
fact that they were murdered
I
and
have the
died
name is
isn't.
Margaret Murdaugh. I know she goes by Maggie, but Margaret Murdaugh as well as Paul Murdaugh. I performed the autopsies on both of these individuals.
All right. And do you recall what day that was?
I'll have to refer to my notes.
There isn't any controversy about how Maggie and Paul died. Maggie and Paul were both killed by gunshot wounds.
Both of the autopsies
The
on
bullet
both,
trajectories will be
Paul
interesting.
and Maggie were performed by me on June 10th, 2021.
And is it typical when you're conducting an autopsy that you have assistants there that assist you in performing these procedures?
probably
and that
students.
sort of
She's
thing?
a
Yes,
teaching
so
hospital.
I have assistants to help me with whatever I need, and the autopsies, I do the autopsy, and any assistance I need is done under my direction.
Sure. And then is it common that photographs are taken of the various injuries and your various findings as you do the autopsy?
Yes,
And if any physical evidence is recovered during
hated
that
going to
autopsy, is law
autopsies.
enforcement present or some official there to take
Like, it was
custody of those?
interesting, but it's
injuries?
they're not
also-
always present,
That's a
but
lot.
if they're not present at the day of the autopsy, they'll come back, and I seal all of the evidence up and with in secure bags, and then those are transferred to the appropriate investigator.
Well, let's go ahead and get to it. And we're going to talk about Paul Murdaugh first, okay?
Okay.
And we also, do we have some poster boards behind you?
She does not go to the crime
First one
scene.
is marked as States 500.
Poster boards?
Can you explain very quickly what this is to the jury?
Okay, so you may have seen these kinds of diagrams.
Okay,
These
good.
are blank body diagrams.
The blank
and,
body diagrams
so
aren't a problem.
When I autopsy a man or
So
male,
does she go to the
I
crime
start
scene?
with that diagram, and
Generally not. And she doesn't
it's
look at crime
basically a
scene pictures.
vehicle
She
for
looks
me
at the
to
bodies.
take notes during the autopsy, so I can
I
incorporate
don't know if we'll see the
findings
diagrams.
into my final autopsy report. But this is not, something
Well, these are the
that,
blank ones.
this is really for my edification, and so I can write things down, and it helps me when I write the autopsy report and to make sure I've covered everything.
And will this assist you?
Oh, I
as
have an LA
we,
County coroner
as you
hat.
Explain to the jury the injuries.
Somewhere I
that the
have one of their
victims suffered?
body
Yes.
outline towels.
Dr. Riemer, let's again, starting with Paul, if you could very quickly, how many, did you observe any gunshot wounds?
They don't
to
need
Paul?
those.
Well,
I think
actually, there were 2 shotgun wounds, so that's different than
if they're going to use
handgun or,
demonstratives, why
so a
now?
shotgun
And why
is,
that?
where there, there's basically pellets
Buckshot.
that are enclosed in a wadding, and the wadding, after it's fired from the shotgun, kind of opens up and allows all these pellets to be released from the wadding. And so the features of his injuries told me in no uncertain terms that he was shot with a shotgun.
And if I could ask you with the court's permission, if you could step down, I'm going to hold up this board, and if you could bring a marker with you, I've got a red Sharpie right here if that helps you. And let's
What?
talk about the injuries that you observed to Paul Murdaugh, and then if you could,
No,
for the jury, if you could illustrate, draw on this board
No.
that the first shotgun wound that you
Creighton,
observed on
what are
Paul.
you doing? Just admit the one that's already been done.
Okay.
Why are you doing this live in front of a jury? That's not precise.
So in order to.
This is not the
make
time for show and
things
tell, Creighton.
Clear to you as possible, I'm
Ugh.
going to use a black marker for an entrance wound and red for exit, okay? So just arbitrarily.
She's
Okay,
already
so-
done this.
Had 2 shotgun wounds.
Just use the one she
One of
already
them
completed, Creighton.
was to the left side of the chest, approximately this location, and the wadding
I hate this so much.
containing the pellets.
I hate this so much.
Traveled beneath the skin through like the soft tissue of the left side of the chest. It didn't actually go into the chest cavity, but traveled beneath the skin and through the muscle and fat before exiting the left axillary. Okay, so it's kind of a straight, kind of left to right, right to left shot. And
just real quick, when you say right to left, you're talking about Paul's right to
yeah,
left.
that's right. So I'm always
They
thinking
can
about like
use the ones
patient's
she wrote
right
at the
to
time.
left.
There is
Exactly. If we
no
look at
need
it, it's from, would be from left to right, but
to
we always,
draw these
for
out. I don't know why
consistency,
they're
it's
doing
always
it.
relative to his body.
Down here by the hands, could you put an R on one side and an L on the other,
sure.
just because I know
The
I get
jury
confused.
is
Yeah, no, it is.
already
And
engaged in
honestly,
this.
we all do this during autopsies as well. because especially we have the back and it's very easy to make a mistake.
And also, just real quick, could you write Paul up at the top there?
They can
Thank you.
just
All right.
use her
All right, so you were
autopsy
talking about
notes.
that first shotgun wound to the chest and where it exited. Were there
Yes.
any other injuries associated with that? Please continue on.
Yes, so.
The defense can't object. This
remember
is
we had
fine to
wadding
do.
and frozen pellets.
I have stylistic
The
issues with
wadding
it.
actually
I think-
got stuck, didn't completely exit and continue to fly.
I think they
out.
could have just
It got
used
stuck right
what she's
underneath
already
the
created.
skin, of the left side of the chest, like
Ugh.
close to the
All right.
armpit area. And we have a photograph of that pink wadding that remained in the skin of the exit wound. From there, multiple of the shotgun pellets started going through like the left arm, okay, starting from the underside of the left arm. So the wadding terminated in the skin.
Oh, so
and then
everybody's
pellets
in
kind
the
of went
in the
out
jury's
and went through the
space
left
with
arm.
this.
And okay, so this is the left. Remember, this is his left side, his left shoulder, his
Just
left arm.
stylistically, I'm not a
And then
fan.
we've got a
I'm
bunch
just
of
not. These are
exit.
horrific injuries. They're going to see horrific photos.
Pellet wounds
This just- it's
on
not
the left side of the arm,
needed.
and some also a little bit on the
Mind
back.
you, she's already created
So
these.
That,
She
you
created
can
these
see this is
during the
going
autopsy.
through,
They
and then
already
this
have
is actually
these.
on the inside of the arm.
They could have blown up
and,
the one she already did and then
the
have her go
exits are
through it,
coming on
but
the
they
left
didn't.
side. So,
Was there any stippling associated with this particular wound?
yes, okay, so there was stippling, and I'll draw that over here, okay? So when a projectile comes out of the barrel of a weapon, be it a shotgun, a handgun, an assault rifle, what propels that projectile, we call, projectile out of the barrel of the gun? Okay, it's
Oh, no,
gunpowder.
we're not
And
going to see
gunpowder
photos. No,
is
no, no.
Basically ignited
Those will be
through
sealed.
the action
We will not
of,
see photos.
the shooter with
No, no.
the gun.
We won't see
And,
photos.
So gunpowder is basically burning and projects the projectile out of the barrel of the gun.
Stippling matters a lot.
A projectile can potentially travel a very long distance, like many feet or yards or a long, depending on the projectile, until it hits something. Or if it doesn't hit anything, it could eventually lose power and go to the ground. But the gunpowder that leaves the barrel of the weapon can travel not too far. It only travels about up to 3 feet, depending on the weapon. So in this case, we actually have some particles of like abrasions from particles of gunpowder. And this is called gunpowder stippling. Okay, so we have stippling, which indicates that this wound was fired at a fairly close range. We can't
Within
say
3 feet.
exactly, but probably no more than 3 feet, because that's our standard. Could be anywhere from 2 to 3 feet. And interestingly enough, there were some markings on the edge of this kind of cookie cutter type of defect from the wadding going in that shows that some of the petals of the wadding are beginning to open. So this is very classic for a shotgun entrance wound, and at the autopsy shows that it went after going through the underneath the left side of the chest. It went through the left arm.
All right. And let me ask you this, and before we look at some of the pictures, which are very graphic, is that correct?
Yes, it's just the nature of the beast.
If this particular injury, was it immediately fatal?
No, amazingly enough, this really, if that was all he sustained, he would have needed medical attention and some stitches and irrigation of the wound to clean it out, make sure he doesn't get infected. But it actually did not pierce the chest or cause any internal bleeding.
So it just went to the side of his ribs.
However, cause a bruise or contusion of the left lung. And that's because, there's a lot of energy associated with this, but didn't actually go through the ribs, but
That
caused
explains
a
why he was still
contusion of the
walking.
left lung. But he would have been expected to continue to be standing after this. It would not have sent him to the ground.
And you saw he
It's
took
good. There's a dowel
footsteps.
stick over by your witness stand, and I'm gonna make sure the jurors down here can see what you're talking about. If you could grab that for me real quick, and then we'll look at some of the pictures here.
Okay, what do you want me to do?
Well, I just wanted to show it to these jurors down here, just to make sure they can see what you were doing. And,
Creighton.
then if you could just stay standing for me.
The
I'm
poor
gonna,
court reporter, they all have their back to the court reporter. Everybody's moving around. Everybody's up by the jury box. And she's, this is so awkward. I don't like it. I don't. Jennifer asked earlier, was the white shirt collected the night of? Yes, it was. When was it washed? No idea. Or if it was just a fresh shirt that he grabbed at some point, but he never said he changed. So, and we know that he did change at some time. It's at what point in time he changed that is a big question. Prosecution is going through the injuries to Torment Alec. They have to talk about some of this stuff. This is,
but I'm gonna have you just look
it's necessary.
States 478.
This can backfire though. If they make it over
479,
sensationalized, the jury could just as easily be like, how could a father ever do this?
482, and
So.
see if you recognize those images.
Okay. So these are photographs.
And just real quick, just tell me if you recognize
I
Please don't hold them up, ma'am.
all of them.
them. All right, and these images that were taken during the autopsy you conducted of Paul Murdaugh.
Yes.
All right, and would they assist you in explaining the injuries?
Thank
to the
you,
jury?
camera person.
Yes.
All right, Your Honor, this time I've moved states 478, 479, 480, 481, and
The
482.
jury is just going to be,
Whatever without objection.
All right. Now, Dr. Riemer, if you get the dowel stick
Just
and
put them
come around
down.
here to the screen, I'm going to put this first image up on the Elmo, and then if you could, we'll talk about these injuries. And
Court TV has really done a good job operating the cameras in every trial we've seen that has sensitive information. They
So,
really have.
We can see, it's not great focus here, but this is the entrance shotgun wound on the left side of the chest. His left nipple is over here. So it's the left side of the chest. And there is some stippling
And
around
Dr.
it.
Riemer, I apologize.
Okay.
If you could come around and work this
These-
way so that all our jurors who are
Oh,
that way can
and
These
see.
exhibits are
Okay.
sealed.
Awesome.
All right.
These exhibits are
So,
sealed. They will not be seen by the
the,
public. They are the victims. They should
shotgun,
not be seen by the public. I
wound
do
is
not want
going
them to be seen by the
in this
public. And if you've
direction.
never seen
Remember,
photos
it
like this, just
exited
trust me
that left
that
side
you
of
don't
the
want to see them
chest and then
either.
continued
Just
through the
trust
left
me.
arm.
These are not visible to the court.
So that is a photograph of that wound.
These should be only
to the
visible to the
shotgun
jury
wound to the chest.
and no one else.
And we'll
These
see
should not
some
be
more
visible
close-up
to the
images here in a
gallery.
minute, but this is the entrance wound right here, is that correct?
Yes.
And then we have some injuries right here. Is that where those
Yes.
petals exited
That
into
is
the arm?
where the wadding, which is the plastic piece and closing the pellets, terminated in the skin. It just didn't manage to get out. But all those pellets kind of got released from the wadding and went through the left arm.
I don't know if the autopsy
I'm
diagrams
going to
will be
move, that
made
was
public.
states 478 for the record. I'm
they
going to move
should
now
be.
to states 479.
The diagrams
And
should
what
be
is
made
this
public.
image?
Okay, so
They
this is
should
a
not be
more
sealed.
close-up view of the entrance wound. And you can see that it looks like there's little, almost squares or pegs sticking out of the edge. And that tells us that the wadding is starting to open because it opens up, there's petals. And this is a classic. I could put it in a book to say that this is
So
consistent
the
with,
shotgun blast was so
a,
close that the wadding
shotgun
didn't open
entrance
all the
wound.
way.
Okay, and we can see the dots around here. Those are from pieces of gunpowder that have basically
That's a stippling.
impacted the skin because it's within a distance of 3 feet or so.
I mean, no one wants to look at these pictures. And it's just,
Moving now to states
autopsy pictures are
480.
horrific.
Okay,
Depending
so
on the case.
usually when
Sometimes
I
they're
take
not
a photo,
as
I
bad.
don't want to go too close
These are
because
gonna be
then you won't
bad.
be able to see where it is on the body. But here, this is
You can see all the
recognized. This is
screens in the
nipple,
courtroom are covered
right?
up by
His left
cardboard.
nipple,
So
And we
Nobody's
saw
looking
the
at these
entrance
except the
wound over
jury.
here. And so here we have this is an exit wound where this pink wadding is basically stuck right there. And you can see these are the petals on the edge, and that's what gave that unique appearance to the entrance wound. Now, this is basically a cylinder that encloses lots of pellets. And then the pellets here, we start to actually have some of the pellets coming through the surrounding skin and then along the left side of the lateral side of the chest, kind of below the armpit area.
All right, and I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 111, already in evidence at this time. Do you recognize that?
Yes, so that is the wadding that I recovered at autopsy and took a picture of it before I recovered it. So that's the wadding that was from Paul's chest.
And just again, point out where that is in that image, please.
Yeah, so here it is.
At
It's
some
kind of
point,
peeking out through this big hole
Photos do become unsealed.
in the left
I
side
have,
of the chest.
I have a lot of personal thoughts about that, but at some point, photos do become unsealed. So,
All right, let me
which is tough. There's
Move on
a
to the
balance
next exhibit.
between. I think there's a balance between
put up on the
curiosity
screen now, States
and
481.
dignity, but there's also a balance
And,
between
this
transparency
image
Okay,
in
so
our
this
court
is a
process and
photograph
public
of
information.
the same wadding,
So,
but I'm taking it from a different angle, okay? So he's lying on an autopsy table, and I've moved his arm up to show the relationship of this wadding with the entrance pellet wounds on the underside, the underside of the left arm.
because
And
it did not go all the way through.
interestingly enough, a lot of times pellets just go through the skin, but here we have some abrasions around the skin, and it actually corresponds to abrasions. We normally don't have abrasions with an exit wound such as we have here, but the fact that we have abrasions
KCL, I'm
on
going to answer
the
this
underside of
after
the
when we get a
left
break.
side of
It's
the
a good
chest,
question. We'll talk about it.
corresponding to the inside of the arm indicates that his arm was down at the time of this injury.
So let me ask you about
That's
that.
important.
In your expert
That's
opinion,
important.
having done 5,500 autopsies, is there any way that Paul's hands were up when he suffered that shotgun wound
He
to the
wasn't-
chest that you've been talking about?
No, the autopsy answers that question, that his arm was down by his side at
He
the time
wasn't
he
defensive.
sustained this injury.
Because he
Again,
didn't think he was going to be
Highlight the
shot.
specific features that you observed that caused you to come to that expert
Okay.
opinion.
So let's just say hypothetically, if his arm was up, you see all of these
He
abrasions
didn't
around this
see a
exit
threat
defect
coming.
and the abrasions around these pellet entrances. We wouldn't see that because those are caused by when these pellets and the wadding is pressing up against the skin is very elastic. So this is just kind of logic. I think you're all going to get this. It's kind of going to push the skin before it actually exits. The skin's going to stretch a lot. And if it hits up against the other portion of the skin, we have kind of abrasions, which are kind of scrapes on the skin around where it exited as well as where it entered. So these are sometimes called it's a shored exit wound. So the skin actually struck another area, and in fact, it corresponds exactly. It's like a reflection. We can see this is reflected. This one is reflected over here. So if we can only get that kind of a mark if his arm is down.
No.
Now this is the kind
No
of
one
thing
in court can
that,
see these photos.
you know,
These are
is-
sealed. Only the jury.
It's the logical conclusion.
Only the
and
jury
I'm
can see them.
confident that was the position of his arm at the time he was shot. And this
He
is
did not-
based on my training.
He did not
and
lift his
more than
arms
20
up.
years of experience doing
He
these.
didn't lift his arms up to
cases.
protect himself
All
or
right.
to brace in
Let
any
me,
way. His arm was down when the first shot, when he was hit with the
Next
first
exhibit,
shot.
which will be 482 for the record. And
And that's
tell
very
us what you
important.
see here, and also if you could, how that also supports the conclusions you were just talking about to the
Yes.
jury.
Okay, so these
Buster
are
is in court.
the
John Marvin is in
pellet
court.
wounds on the outside of the arm in this area.
Oh, its sister is in
Right, so
court.
this is kind of like his armpit here. And we can see these are kind of just, these pellet exit wounds don't have the kind of abrasions around it. This is just kind of finding its way through the skin. And then this one is over here. So, and if the further the pellets travel, it kind of splays out. So after the pellets leave the wadding that is open, they're spread. So, but these are, exit pellet wounds, and we don't have the kind of abrasions to suggest that his arm was pressed up against anything at the time that those pellets exited.
All right. One other thing as well is when talking about his arm being down, of course, the wadding stopped in that wound still in his chest, correct?
Yes.
All right. Let's move on. Just give me 1 second here to get some other exhibits and show them to defense counsel.
So they're probably going to move on to talk about the second shotgun blast. This was the first shotgun blast. At some point, they talked about the trajectory of the shotgun blast. It sounded like it was going up to back, front to back, and then down to up up his body, which is why you have wadding stuck near his arm. Again, that's what it sounds like. We have not seen the diagrams. I think at some point we will see the diagrams, not the photos. And again, the diagrams are a diagram with entrance and exit wounds all put on them and things like that.
All right, Dr. Riemer,
So-
if I could get you maybe to stand that way just a little bit. I know we're in tight confines, and then we're trying to be as respectful as we can with these images. I'm going to show you now what's been marked as 483, states 484, states 485, 486, and 487. And just quickly tell me if you recognize those, and then I want to go back to the board before we talk about those pictures.
Yes, I recognize these.
All right, and those autopsy photographs that you took of
Yes.
Paul Murdaugh,
These are photographs that I took at the autopsy of Palmer.
and would they assist you in explaining to the jury the injuries that he suffered?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time I'd move states 483, 484, 485, 486, and 487 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
They are admitted.
And Your Honor, I think all these exhibits, both he and I, 90% of them that we're introducing will be under seal.
Yes, sir, and for the record,
It's already been discussed. Boot.
these are under seal, and I provided the cover sheets to the court reporter. Every exhibit except for the poster board that we're doing,
That's
the state
strategy.
request to be under seal because of their graphic nature.
That's Poot wanting to look like the
All
good
right,
guy in front of the
Dr.
jury.
Let's, that was, and we'll come back a little bit more to that first injury, but there was a second shotgun injury
It's already
as well.
been
Is that
determined
correct?
outside the presence of the jury. Poot.
And I'm going to go back to States 500, which is the poster board. And if you could explain to and draw on this diagram that second injury, and then
Okay.
we'll look at the pictures.
So there was a large shotgun wound defect to the top of his left shoulder. And there were lots of pellets recovered in the left shoulder area. And from there, it kind of just went across the top of the left shoulder and then went into the left side of the neck and face. Okay, and from there, his face actually was not destroyed from this, but there's a big exit wound on the top of the right side of the head.
It went
So
this way.
this wound
across,
went from
across
his
from
left
shoulder out.
toward his right and
This way.
upward, and with a slight front to back deviation.
So
Now,
slight
what
front
does
to back.
that tell us? We don't really know. It's kind of going toward, it's sparing his face, it's going behind the face. Now, one thing that makes sense to me, how could that happen? If he was just standing, not everybody gets shot like standing like these diagrams, right? But if he was shot and his face was forward, it would have taken off a lot of his face.
He might have been.
However, if he is turned toward the shooter, then it's going to go into the face here and go out towards the right back of the head. So to me, it makes sense that his head is turned to the left. Not necessarily completely, but partially turned to the
He's
left.
shot on the left
And,
side. He might
What
have turned to
happened here
see.
was a extremely
He might have turned to see
severe,
and then shot
immediately
again.
fatal injury, because what it did was that after it went through the left side of the neck and face, our brain is basically held up through the skull. So we have bone at the top of the skull, but then we also have a bone that kind of holds up the brain. It went through the base of the skull, okay, which is kind of like in this area, the brain is up there. And this wound, actually, his brain was ejected out of the top of the right side of his head and actually arrived at the autopsy in a separate bucket. So the force of this wound actually pushed the brain out of his head. There was only just a small piece of brain remaining, and that's the brain stem that was attached to the spinal cord.
All right, and real
Hoot is
quickly,
standing to see
going back
what
to
this
the
witness is
first
doing.
wound to the chest, if Paul was standing when he suffered that, could he have remained standing after suffering that wound?
No.
Yes.
All right. The second wound, the one that starts in the shoulder and goes in here and then
That's
out the
what I
top
thought
of
he was
his
talking
head,
about when I
what
said
would have been
no.
the effect of that wound?
Immediate.
That would have been immediately
Instantaneous.
fatal, and he would not have been standing. He would have just fallen to the ground.
All right, and would he have been capable at all of bracing his fall or anything like that with a catastrophic injury like that?
No, that's instantaneous death.
Which also explains.
Did you notice any abrasions on his face or anything like that?
Yes, he did have, and it's depicted in one of the photographs. He does have a kind of a scrape on his face.
You guys, the ME
very
testimony is
frequently
hard. If
scrapes
it
on
is
the
hard,
face
it's okay
that
to
have-
come
they have
back.
a-
This will probably
it
be
has
the
a
rest of
slight
the day.
directionality. It's
Truthfully.
consistent with a terminal collapse. So if he's hitting the ground with some movement, there's frequently kind of a linear pattern. And, all of this really makes sense. Once you see these things, you can understand that if somebody's going to fall with the force of their body and they're going to hit their face on the ground, and we get some abrasions that correspond to that.
All right. And let me do this real quick. If you could grab that dowel stick for me, and I'm going to make sure the jurors down
So
here.
what she testified to is that the first shot came in the left chest,
Okay.
That's the shoulder right
second
there,
shot
and then
hit
I
the
should
left
have made a
shoulder,
red mark here.
up into the head, out the right side, slightly back. Not as if somebody was facing forward, but if somebody had turned.
Of that exit.
What that says to me is
a little
that
bit
the
about
first shot came in, he wasn't bracing, and he turned to look when the second shot came in at the shot and where it's coming
maybe
from.
use me as an example. And,
That
and
says-
show me
that's what that
kind of
says
What
to
you're,
me.
what you're talking about. You can
Okay.
position me however you want to.
Yeah, okay.
Let's go out here.
Oh, I hate this so much.
Like a different idea, okay? In order to
But the
understand how that's the case.
turn to
So,
see where that first shot came from,
if
because it was unexpected.
A shotgun
wasn't
wound is
bracing.
entering the top of the left shoulder, and let's say his head is turned like that, it's going to go right through the face, right? But if his head is turned like that, it's going to spare the face and be able to go behind the face. So if somebody's just standing looking straight ahead, this most likely would have done a lot of damage to his face. But the fact that the face is remained intact tells me that his head
He
was,
looked-
I don't
he
know,
looked
up and
at the
down, but
person-
his head was
He looked at the person who
facing in
shot
the
him at the direction of the
from
first
where,
shot. Yep.
The shotgun was.
Looked at the first, got shot, and then looked. Because he didn't expect to get
Yes.
shot,
So,
because he didn't perceive a threat,
kind of on
because
the
it
top of
wasn't
the
someone
shoulder.
random.
This also did not injure his chest cavity. It kind of went through a lot of the skin and muscle and fat of the left shoulder. And there were a lot of pellets that were recovered from the left shoulder area.
Which
as
leads me to
well
believe,
as,
by the way, that he
the
was
head
probably
injury.
shot first based on this.
And I'm going to show you very quickly what's been marked as states 110. And do you recognize this item already in evidence?
Yes, these are the pellets that I recovered from the left shoulder and head area.
All right. I'm going to go ahead, and if you could stay on that side so the jurors can see, and I'm going to,
This side?
yeah, if you could work on
We
this
also
side so
heard-
that the jurors down at that end can see.
We
I'm
also
gonna-
heard that there were a few footsteps. And so with the few footsteps, with the first shot not being fatal, we heard
All
that
right,
there were a
and
few
I'm going to show
footsteps.
you
So I'm not surprised by that. That he's
first
then
what's
looking
been
in the
marked
direction of
as
where he was
states
shot.
483.
It's very sad.
And
Very, very sad.
Can you tell me what's on this particular image, particularly as to some of the things you were just describing as to the
Because
abrasion
if
and things like
you
that?
think the defendant did it,
Yes. So.
he didn't
we
see
can
that first
see
shot coming
this
and
is
then
basically
looked.
An abrasion is a fancy word for scrape. So there are scrapes on the right side of his face. And you can see they kind of have, you can kind of see that there's a little bit of a linearity. So if he just fell completely flat, we might just get like, dots. But if there's some movement, we get, it's kind of, he's hitting the ground and then moving a little bit as his face hits. So we get this kind of vertical direction.
They're
And this
talking
is a
about the
very
gravel.
typical type of injury to
Because
the
his face
face
hit the
that somebody
gravel.
might suffer from a terminal collapse. So after they sustain a fatal injury, what are they going to do? They're going to fall to the ground. Now, depending on the surface of, if it's concrete or, grass, we might get some. But this is very typical of, I don't know what kind of surface it was, but a terminal collapse.
Okay.
Gravel. It was cement, concrete, and gravel. So, and this is, again, they are not
All right,
being,
you would,
I think, overly
With this image, and this would be stage 484.
graphic
Please
and
explain
trying
to the
not to
jury
be.
using
They're
this
really
image some of
just
the
trying
concepts
to
that you've been describing
explain
to them.
So
what
this
the
is
jury
the
is
top
seeing.
of his left shoulder. And this is the
Those are the photos.
continuation of the ammunition through the left side of the lower face. And from there, it proceeded behind the face through the base of the skull and exited the right side of the top of the head. And sort of toward the back of the right side of the top.
And those two sort of together, that's kind of what you're describing for when you had positioned my head in the
Yes.
manner in which you
Yeah,
did.
that's right. So now if you turn to the left like that. I think that makes the most logical sense, and forensic pathology is really logical. So when we look at these
Forensic
things, we have to
pathology
think,
is
well,
really
how could
logical.
this
I
have
agree.
happened? And, after the, it's not always immediately obvious, but, with some thought, we can come to these conclusions with confidence.
Turning now to stage 485.
So again, the first shot came from the side, front to back.
Yes, so this
And
is the
then
same
turned his
injury.
face
This
towards the
is
shot
formed by
for
a
the second one.
single piece of ammunition here that went through the top of the left shoulder, it tore it up, right? And then went into the left side of his face and neck. And some of these pellets also did a lot of damage in the neck because they kind of splay out as they go further. And some of them
That's
went
talking about the
actually
wadding.
through his airway and other structures of the
And
neck.
that's talking about the
As
butt
well
shot
as continuing
laying through the body.
the base of the skull
It's awful.
and propelling the majority of the brain out the right side of the back of the head.
The court reporter is a verbal stenographer. I think that's the correct terminology for it. But that is her stenography machine. She is doing it verbally instead of
The end of
typing.
that particular one.
So that is what is happening in
So,
front of the court.
You can kind of see, it looks like this piece of his head, we're not really seeing the entire thing because his forehead is basically still intact, but you can appreciate at this point that, the contours of his skull are disrupted. And that's because there's a defect at the top of the skull, but not involving the forehead, so it's kind of in the back. So we know it started at the shoulder, it's in the back, so his head may have been like that, facing toward the left.
That was stage 486, and finally stage 487.
Okay, now this is, all right, so this is,
I can't.
Yes.
Sorry for me to see what I'm doing.
it's
but-
okay, yeah, so this is actually a photograph of the right side of, this is his, the face area, okay, and I know that because I usually, when I take a photograph of the number, I usually have it like right side up, okay? So this is the top of his head, and this is,
Not Riemer, I apologize.
no,
Let me
yeah,
do it like that.
yeah, that's
Oh my
good,
God,
right.
stop,
So now you
Brayden,
can
just
sort of
let her
see, this is the
explain.
right side of his head, and it's horrible, I know. And there's a big defect there. And we can see the inside of the skull, but his face was spared. So.
All right, Dr. Riemer, if you would.
Buster's in court. John Marvin's in court. Alex's sister's in court.
The jury room for a few moments. Please not discuss this.
Why are we taking another break? They've already taken an afternoon break. Unless the judge perceives that the jury needs a break or something else has happened, it's odd to me that the court's taking a break right now. It's odd. Unless the jury, if the judge looked at the jury and saw that they needed a break. But I'm wondering why the court's taking a break. This is unusual to me, so I'm waiting to see what the court is going to do or say. Can we have audio back, please? The judge is about to talk. The jury is out of the room. They cut the microphones. The court said, okay, I think he said 5-minute break. He might have said 10-minute break. The judge might have seen that the jury needed a break. I don't know. The judge might have needed a break. That's really interesting to me. But the audio never came back on, which is really frustrating. All right. So let us continue. Let us continue with questions. The jury might be struggling. It's awful. So with that, you also have all of the monitors in the courtroom are covered. So the audience is not seeing this. These are going to be horrific photos.
Could you try again?
No, these are going to be horrific photos. So the jury is going to probably need a break, and I'm not surprised. She said, it's hard, I know, to the jury. She said, I know it's horrific to the jury. And that's probably reacting to their faces. These are the most graphic photos they would have seen at this point. I'm going to go through some of your questions. Autopsy photos are just horrible, especially when there's catastrophic injury to the body. Sometimes when you have gunshot wound victims, you literally only see the entrance and exit, and they're quite small because most of the damage is done internally, not externally. There is quite a lot of damage done externally to Paul, not as much to Maggie, but that is the difference between the shotgun and the rifle. So I'm not surprised. And it's interesting because we see, we've heard testimony that his arms were not up, which the prosecution's going to argue is because he didn't perceive a threat. And whether that means that Alec is the one who did this or whether it was someone else that they know, but we have no indication that there was a third person at the kennels. None. There's just nothing that indicates anybody else was there. So nothing, just nothing that indicates somebody else was there at this point. And if it was a complete stranger, then one would have expected to have seen something else, or at least arms up. We will hear which direction Maggie was traveling in when we get to that part of the testimony. So it's absolutely a horrific scene for sure. Line asked, I don't see defense. I think sup AM, but arms crossed instead. I'm sorry. I cannot decode. My brain is very tired. I cannot decode that. I apologize. SOS pins. The details about what happened between the first and second bullet is horrifying. It's very sad, but it's also very telling and it's needed. And that's what we'll talk about. Why is this needed? First, they have to prove that Paul and Maggie were killed. That's an element of the crime that they have to prove. And well, you can have everybody say, yes, they were killed. Yes, they were killed. You need someone to come in and say, yes, they are dead. Yes, it was because of gunshot. But you also need to know the detail of what happened at the crime scene. And the detail comes from what the body tells you. And that's exactly what this witness is going through. What does the body tell you? How did bullets travel? What were the movements and what can we learn from them? And Some of that is not, some of that is seeing whether arms are up or not up. Some of that's looking for defensive wounds on hands or arms, things like that. So that's why. Does the upward shoulder to head trajectory make sense with Alec Murdaugh being so tall? Jennifer, I think this is what the defense is going to argue. It doesn't mean that somebody can't hold a shotgun down low instead of holding a shotgun up at shoulder length, which also might be why Paul looked towards the direction of where he was shot from, because he didn't see it coming at all. Didn't perceive a threat, wasn't on high alert. And this is somebody who rolls around. I mean, Paul rolled around this whole property with guns. It's not somebody that's unfamiliar with weapons, but saw just nothing coming and perceived no threat. So I'd need to know if someone was shot first moves the needle. We're going to hear from how Maggie was moving and whether Maggie was moving towards Paul or away. But the way that Paul was standing and the way that he turned towards it indicates to me that he was probably first. The other thing that indicates to me that the prosecution believes it was first is they wanted to cover what happened to Paul first. So putting in the jury's mind an ordering of Paul and then Maggie, and they're doing that for a reason. It's not just like they're randomly deciding which one to cover first, and they're not just going in order. I think they are going in order that they believe these witnesses or these victims were killed in, because there were no witnesses to that order. I believe this is the prosecution saying this is how we think it happened. So that's what I'm expecting that they're going to argue later. So Java said, I imagine that this could be very triggering to your previous cases. I mean, it's why I don't cover a ton of criminal stuff. Thank you for being here with us to listen to this. Please take care of yourself as well. I will. I actually find that going through, this is what I enjoy about pathology and science in general, is it's a very ordered way of going through it. It's definitely not as hard as the audio from the videos in the Waukesha case, which is absolutely gut-wrenching and devastating. This is hard testimony. It's just sad testimony, but it is not nearly as hard for us as it is for the jury, because she is talking it through in a very ordered, scientific, almost academic way, which is exactly what medical examiners are. It's a very academic and linear approach to it, which is it's weird to say routine, but it's very routine. It's not meant to be sensationalized. It's not meant to be overly gory. It's meant to be clinical and almost a little sterile, because it is so hard. But the trajectory is so needed in this case. Very, very needed. Shina said, now thinking Maggie might have seen her son get killed is such a devastating way is just horrible to think about it. It is. It is horrible to think about it. It absolutely is. Jay Smart said, was it me or did AM get real still when they described that AM looked at his when Paul looked at his killer? I wasn't looking at what Alec was doing during that, because it was processing in my brain really what she was saying. Sailboat RN said, you're 100% correct, EDB. For people that are not familiar with catastrophic injuries, this is extremely graphic. Hearing this pathologist makes it clear to me that the injuries were not compatible with life. It's very sad. Paul's injuries were not, and that's what law enforcement said when they first arrived too. Because the defense, do you remember the defense cross-examining some of the officers? Well, you didn't take a pulse. And I think it was the fire captain said it was clear that these injuries were not compatible with life. But Alec knew that too. He says it in the 911 call. He knows. And in the 911 call, he says, which makes it even different, which makes it difficult when we then get to him asking on the first, when the police first arrive and Alec first interacts with them, the very first interaction with police in person are they officially dead? Is it this? Is it that? It's different because on his 911 call, he knows that it's catastrophic. So so but yeah, Paul knew. Paul looked at the person who shot him, or at least looked conclusively in the direction of the person who shot him and saw who shot him. Paul could have been holding his side when he turned, then his head would have been lower. Could have been, but that's not what she said. So we'll see on cross-examination if they ask about that. V-Sales said, it's so bad. I did him so bad. That sentence makes a lot of sense if he wasn't anticipating Paul to turn around. It does. And it depends on what you hear in that call, whether it's I did him so bad or they did him so bad or I did it so bad. If you assume that Alec did this, I don't think he expected that to happen. But if he didn't do this and he staggered across this scene, then it's wild. It's hard for me to believe that with the timing, he wasn't aware that this happened. I don't know if they've proven that he pulled the trigger. So we'll see. As Peggy said, I'm struggling so much with the motive for this murder. Based on the evidence so far, I'm leaning towards it being Alec that did it, but I just can't get my head around why. I have more questions than answers, and this jury might end up with more questions than answers, which will be very interesting when we go into deliberation with them. When they go into deliberation and we sit here pondering what they're deliberating, the RN in me flipped the switch and is fascinated. Yeah, because it's to be able to walk through what happened that night. It is nice to finally get to the pathology. This was stippling. So this was within like 3 feet with a shotgun. So to have somebody within 3 feet of you with a shotgun and for you not to be defensive says a lot. Like it says a lot, doesn't it?
Bring the jury.
All right. They are bringing the jury. But for there to be somebody that close without there being defensiveness, and especially for a young individual who has, by all accounts, been threatened, been assaulted due to those threats, is familiar with weapons, owns weapons, to have somebody within 3 feet of you with a shotgun and not feel threatened says a lot. Why didn't he feel threatened? Well, because it's somebody that he knows. Whether that's his dad or not, we don't know. So, is Alec required to be in the courtroom for this? Yes. He has a right to confrontation. So, Kat A-List said she is not chipper. She's matter of fact. I thought she was matter of fact. She definitely has teacher voice on to me. Many reliable sources reporting Alec will testify next week all over Twitter. Until they call him to the stand, it's speculation.
Thank you. You may proceed.
So we'll see.
Your Honor, may I please score?
It's a terrible idea.
Dr. Riemer, before we took a break, we were obviously discussing the very catastrophic injuries from that second shotgun wound to Paul, and that would have been immediately fatal. Is that correct?
Yes.
Let me ask you this very quickly. Do you see any evidence of any defensive wounds on Paul?
No, I did not.
Can you describe quickly what a defensive wound is and then explain why you see none in this particular instance for this?
Yes. So a defensive wound is, sometimes somebody might sustain injuries that suggest that they had their hands or arms up while trying to defend themselves from from what is about to happen. And I don't see anything on his hands that would indicate, he had his hands up to his face in anticipation of the injury that was about to happen. So.
And in your expert opinion, as you described it to the jury before, his arm was down for that first shot.
Yes. So that first shot, his arm was down, and I don't see any evidence of injury to his hands from the second.
Within feet of him. 3 feet of him.
That abrasion on his face is consistent with that second shot and him just having terminal
Right.
collapse.
So falling to the ground,
Poot looks like he's
the
asleep,
right side
y'all.
of his face on the ground, with a little bit of forward movement. So we got that kind of linearity.
Did the woman behind him just
and
say,
that would
they
be
know you're
consistent
sleeping?
with collapsing to the ground.
You look like you're sleeping.
It's very frequently.
He does, though. She's
people,
right.
After sustaining any kinds of disabling injuries, if they're standing up, they're going to fall. It's just gravity. And so he fell, and he was face down at the time. So he had a scrape on the cheek, which is the surface of his body that impacted the ground.
What were toxicology results on Paul, if any?
Yes. So
anything that he might have had in his system?
He might be honest.
Oh, yes. So every person that has an autopsy at MUSC, and everybody gets a full toxicology testing done. MUSC does not actually perform toxicology, but toxicology was sent to a toxicology lab that tests for any possible substances that may be in the blood. And the only thing he had in the blood at the time of his death was caffeine.
No alcohol or drugs.
No alcohol or drugs, was negative.
Me.
Were you
Anytime you
able to
test
reach
me,
any
caffeine.
conclusion about the order in which Paul suffered these shotgun blasts?
Okay.
Yes.
Well, in
1,
my
2.
opinion, based on my education and experience, the first shotgun
Was the non-fatal
wound,
one, and the second one was
the
the fatal
initial
one.
shot was to the chest, following which he remained standing and sustained the other gunshot wound to the top of the left shoulder and head. If we think about it, well, is it possible that the other one was first? It just kind of defies logic, right? So if he got that one first on the left shoulder and through his head, we know that one sent him to the ground. So he fell to the ground, hit the right side of the face. How is he possibly going to get that one to the front of the chest? So it's just hard to imagine a scenario in which the shotgun wound to the head was first.
Yeah, the
Let's move now, if
non-fatal
we
one,
can,
and then the
to,
fatal one.
Maggie Murdaugh, and you did her autopsy as well as you described to the jury. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
They'll probably do time of
And,
death last.
how
if
many-
they ask?
Gunshot wounds, just very quickly, did you observe on Maggie?
So she sustained a total of 5 gunshot wounds from a minimum of 4 shots. So it could have been from 4 shots with 5 wounds or 5 separate shots. And I will explain once we do that.
I have what's been marked as States 501, and again, this is another diagram that would assist you in explaining these injuries.
Yes, so this is the female, the woman diagram, and and this is what I used to take
She said
notes
4
while
or
I
5.
performed the autopsy.
All right, if you would,
She said
step
4 or
down,
5
please,
because-
and walk over here, and we'll do the
One
the same
could have-
procedure.
Well, she'll
with
explain,
Maggie.
but
Start
it
out
could have
by
been
writing
4 or
her
5.
Name at the
With
top,
Maggie,
and then put the left and right on
remember,
there too to aid us in understanding.
There were 7 casings found near Maggie's body. So,
Okay.
Bethany, I don't even know if
All
I
right,
can focus on
Let
yeeted spears
me do
doing
this
shit.
very quickly.
I do not have time for yeeted spears' shit, but thank you. I will definitely go look at it. This week's podcast is going to be about Alec Baldwin, but next week,
And going back
we
to
can talk
States
about
500, and this is Paul, is that correct?
whatever
Yes.
yeeted's
And
up
you had
to.
an arrow right here kind of showing the direction of shot number 1, is that
Yes.
right? Can you
But this
do
is
an arrow
also-
for shot number
Sure.
2, please?
These shots are now coming from the
And Your Honor, this time I
300
moved States
blackout
500 into
AR.
evidence for demonstrative purposes.
So
Or move it into
that's
evidence.
these are shooting
Is he
much.
going to just use it for demonstrative purposes, or is he moving it into evidence?
I move it into evidence, Your Honor.
No objection.
It's admitted without objection.
This is a much
All right,
faster,
going back to 501, this would be Maggie, is that correct?
a much faster.
All right, if you
shot than a
could,
shotgun.
start to detail the injuries that you observed to Maggie and what is the most probable order based on your review of the
Okay.
evidence?
Well, first of all, this was a different weapon. It was not a shotgun with wadding and pellets. These injuries that Maggie sustained were they're completely consistent with an assault rifle. Okay, so it's a different weapon. And I'm going to go through the 5 wounds, and then we'll think about how I'll try to explain my opinion as to the likely order, just sort of like we figured out Paul's shotgun wound to the chest came first, but we'll do the same with hers. But she's got a few more wounds, so it could be require a little bit more logical thinking. Okay, so she
Well, we're
had
here
an
for logical
entrance
thinking.
wound that was right over there. Okay, it's kind of right below the rib cage, not far from the middle of her midline of her body. And that wound, okay, now we're going to remember, this is right and left. It's very easy to get the right-left situation confused, but that's going from front to back and downward, and there was an exit wound kind of like right down here. Okay, so it entered here. Okay, so we're
Front to
in
back
a
and
kind
down.
of downward direction. It was actually 10 inches below where it entered. So it's
So
pretty
very much
low.
downward.
You know, down here was the exit wound. And on the way, that projectile, that bullet, went through the abdominal wall. That's like our muscle and all that. And then once it got inside the body, it went through mesentery, which is the supportive tissues of our intestines. So it went through mesentery, has all the blood vessels and lymphatics, all that stuff that supports our intestines. The intestines take up a lot of room in there. Now it's continuing to go toward the back of her body, went through the pancreas, okay, which is kind of toward the back. And then as it's traveling left,
She very clearly
it went through the left
reviewed for her
kidney
testimony because she is
and
going no
left
notes
iliac artery,
through
which is
what
a blood
each bullet
vessel
hit, which is
that
quite
leads off the aorta
quite a lot.
before exiting the left side of the back.
All right. And let's go ahead. Can we do the second wound, and then we'll talk about both of those together in a
Okay.
second, if we could.
So we've got two that are basically completely to the front of the body, directly to the front. And there's another wound that's kind of on the front inside of the left thigh, kind of like over there. Okay. And this one is also going from front to back and
So we're now at
toward the
3
left
wounds
and
on
downward.
the front of the body,
So
downward.
These two shots follow a parallel path. They're both, this is the left, okay, left leg, right, left thigh. And the exit wound was in the back of the left thigh. And this is a little bit too high, okay, I should,
Right. This is
but
why
it was,
you
it
use
was lower.
the one that they drew
down,
at
yeah.
the autopsy.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, so
That's why you
it's traveling
use-
in a downward direction.
That's why you use
and
the one from the
also
actual
with a
autopsy,
kind of
not a
slight
recreation in
right to
court.
left. So
That's why.
I'm
Oh,
going
this
to
is
draw
actually a little
an
too high.
arrow
Yeah.
to
Use the one they
indicate
drew when they're
the
looking at
direction,
it.
Okay, so that one's going like that. And then this one is also going in the same direction, downward toward the back.
All right. And those, you said, followed kind of a parallel trajectory?
Yes, they had a relatively parallel trajectory. Another feature of each of these wounds is that, remember we talked about gunpowder stippling when somebody is shot at a relatively close range. Well, both of these wounds had gunpowder stippling around them. Okay. Right.
And
Now-
go ahead and remind the jury what stippling indicates about probable distance from a
Yeah, so
firearm.
within 3 feet.
They
You don't
remember.
usually see it any more than 3 feet. Sometimes it's within 2 feet, but depending on the firearm, I can't say exactly, but it's somewhere in that range.
They remember.
It's a fairly close range and parallel trajectories for these two
right.
wounds.
You have no question,
Is that
Henry
correct?
Creighton.
Yes.
They know.
And
This
they
jury
both
is
exited,
traumatized. They know.
the left side of
This is very
the body.
close.
One was on the
Which makes sense why they
this is
brought
her
these
left
weapons into
leg.
court
It's
to
really
show
easy
how
to get
long these
turned
weapons
around
were
here. Okay, left
and how close
left
you would be.
thigh, and the other's on the left side of the lower back. And the one to the left leg actually just went through. It went through muscle and soft tissue. Didn't
Just
actually
threw him through on
break
the
a
leg.
bone.
All right. If those two wounds, let's go ahead and do all the wounds. Can we go to the next wound that we have? And before we do that, was there a wound to the wrist in this particular instance?
Yes, there was
Answer
a
one question.
wound to the wrist, and it was on the left wrist. The entrance wound was somewhere around here. And, okay, so this is her left wrist, and then the exit wound was a little bit higher on the inside of the arm. So this is the kind of the hairy part, this part, and then the inside where there was an exit wound.
All right. And using my left hand, can you kind of point generally to the jury about the location of those?
Yeah, so kind of going in here and out there.
So in and out through the
All right.
arm.
All right. So that's 3 gunshot injuries at this point. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All
4?
right.
I thought we were
now
at
tell me
4.
about the fourth one, if you would,
Okay.
please.
Oh,
So the fourth one was somewhat unusual.
why? Why?
Because it's going in an upward direction through the body. Okay, there was an entrance wound on the underside of the left breast that
Went up and back.
exited like the top of the left breast. Okay, and from there we have some marks on. There's like bruising on the left side of the chest up here, the left clavicle, and that bullet continued through the underside of the left side of the face. Okay, so there's a wound kind of like over there, okay, and it's everything is kind of going up. So this was an exit, and then we have like a re-entrance, okay? So we have a series of defects. We have, this is an entrance,
So
an
it kept
exit,
traveling.
and then
as-
the bullet continued through the left side of the face and lower ear area and into her head.
Remember,
Okay.
they
Now,
found
in
a
addition
broken
to
earring
that-
with
Just real quick, those first two wounds
body,
that you described, the wound to
hair,
the abdomen
near
and the wound to the leg, and those are both
ATVs.
to the front of the body, is that
So
correct?
that makes
And
sense why they
both-
found the
both had a
broken
similar
earring with
parallel
hair,
trajectory, is that correct?
Yes.
that it was
Would
taken.
either one of those wounds
out
been
there.
immediately fatal?
No,
All right. The wound you just described, and how about the wound to the wrist? Would that have been immediately
No.
fatal? What about the wound that you just described that went in near the breast and then went into the head?
yes, that would have been immediately fatal because when it entered the left side of the face, it basically destroyed the brain.
And was there another gunshot injury, traumatic gunshot injury aside from that one?
Yes, but I'm going to, before I continue, I did want to mention that there was an abrasion, kind of a scrape below that, which indicate below her left breast. So it indicates before it actually went through the left breast, it kind of scraped along the abdomen as it was going upward before it went into her head.
On the
That's-
injury, the
that's a-
gunshot wound, the assault rifle wound to the abdomen,
That's
and
an
the
odd
assault rifle
angle.
wound to the leg, you said there was stippling there. Is that correct?
Yes, the
Did you-
other wounds did
So-
not have any stippling,
Right,
so
so
they
they-
were from further back.
The wrist wound had no stippling?
Correct.
And that wound that you just described going up into Maggie's head, that did not have any stippling either?
Correct.
It's an odd
You mentioned
trajectory.
there's one more as well to her head. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, describe that to the jury using this chart, please, or this diagram.
Okay. So there was an entrance wound
We're going to have to
to the
hear.
back of the head. Okay, that was kind of like right over there. Okay, and it's kind of near the base of her skull. And that was going downward. Okay, now this is like automatic rifle.
She's going to go through the body moving.
Like it's a rifle ammunition. So it's not a single, cylindrical projectile that remains intact.
I think for the
These
very last
rifles,
shot, she was already on the ground.
projectiles fragment as they go through the body. That's one of the mechanisms by which they do enormous damage. Okay. Now, this wound was going in a downward direction, and then we have lots of exit wounds on the right side of her upper back, where all of those fragmented projectiles, fragments, exited. And this wound, it's in a clearly downward direction. It entered the back
Execution
of her
style on the
head,
back of the head.
went through the back of the skull,
Yep.
and through the brainstem and cerebellum. Okay, so these are vital portions at the very bottom of the brain, but it did not enter into her chest. It continued just scraping along the top of the back. So we know this is going in a downward direction. So how do we reconcile? How do we?
She's going to
make
talk about the
sense
way that the
of
body moved
a
to make
wound
sense.
that's going upward and
And
then another wound that's
downward.
going downward. Okay, you'll recall this wound that went through her left breast and into the left side of her face. injured her brain, right? She's not going to be standing anymore. Now, how would this even go upward? Okay, that those first 2 shots, right? The one to her, or we'll say the one to her, to the right side of her abdomen, that went, remember, through her pancreas and the left kidney. Kidney pain is usually very painful. We can imagine this did not immediately cause that, but she may have been bent over straight, and
Because of the pain.
that puts her in a position, if someone's bending over, leaning over to get a gunshot wound that goes along. So when we look at her body in an upright position, and she's got a gunshot wound going upward, we know it's going upward because it ended in her head. Probably her body was bent over, and it may have been that she just sustained this very painful wound to her abdomen, not in addition to her thigh, and she was
Crumpled.
most likely, in my opinion, bent over or even possibly on the ground, but not completely lying flat, at the time, because then it would never have been able to go through the front, you have some like skip areas here. So if she's bent over, we have some skin folds, we're going to get a skip, plus it went through the underside of the left breast, exited the top of the left breast. So that would indicate that her breast may have been sort of, like pain down a little bit.
All right, so do you have that dowel stick anywhere? Unless if you would, just, again, use me, if you could, just describe some of the concepts you're talking about. And let's start with those first 2 shots to the abdomen, and then just kind of position me as we move on to the shots.
All right, so one
Stand
wound.
over here if you would. so
Okay,
that you're-
absolutely. Okay. Well, now I have to.
There are
I'll
5
I'll have to,
wounds.
Yeah, I can't
She
show
could
this. Yeah,
She could have been
show this.
shot
The
4
entrance
or
would be
5
about
times.
there, right, top of the abdomen, and it went through the body, exiting on the left side of the lower back.
Mhm.
And while it was in the body, went through the pancreas and the left kidney and a blood vessel nearby.
All right, and then the wound to the thigh.
Okay, the thigh was kind of on the front, but a little bit toward the inside area. And that exited lower down on the left thigh, in the back of the left thigh.
That one to the abdomen, would that have been very painful?
Yes, I mean, kidney, if you ever knew anybody that had a kidney stones are some of the worst pain in medicine. People who aren't get a kidney stone have to be on very high doses of morphine just to control the pain.
Buster is
Well,
still in
she
the
had
courtroom.
a,
I
you
can
know,
see him
like
in the same row as
projectiles,
his uncle.
ammunition going through her left
So
kidney.
I
You
still
can
see him in
imagine
there
that was a very
currently.
painful wound and may have caused her to like fold over in pain.
So something like this?
Yes.
All right, and could it even been that she went to the ground and she's on her hands and knees, something like this?
Yes, that's also possible, and she could have had her head bent down or like sort of
Things I've
touching
never
the
done
ground
in a
with that
courtroom.
as well.
This
Crawl
shot,
around
this
on the
one right
floor like
here,
Creighton Waters.
that you described right there, is there any way at that point in time she could have
Creighton,
been completely
get off the floor.
thrown flat on the ground like this?
No, because then how, well, it's not just going to go up. So she has to at least have been, I can't say for sure, but it makes sense that after receiving those first 2 shots, she's going to be bent over at least, or possibly, even lower to the ground, enabling her to get a wound.
And if you could, bounce
Yeah,
over,
like
could
that,
you do
that's
this?
perfect. Okay, going through the front of the left side of the chest, and if your head is bent over even
Down
further,
lower than the
can
rest of
imagine
you.
It's going to go into the head like that. Okay, so
That's the upward
when,
trajectory.
I first look at this, I'm like, what?
It's not upward.
It takes a little.
It's
but in
downward, 'cause
retrospect,
she's
now
bent
that
over.
I've made sense of this, it all comes together.
So drop to her knees.
So far at this point in time,
Moving
we talked
forward
about the
and then
abdomen and the thigh wound. In your opinion, of
horrible.
those 2 shots, the first 2 shots she suffered?
Yes, I think she was standing upright at the time, and then she only could have gotten the wound to the left side of,
All the happy
left side of
squirrels
the
said,
front
Emily, you sound like
into
such a
her,
mom. Creighton, get off the
into her
floor.
head,
Yes.
If she's horizontal.
Get off
but
the
not
floor,
completely on the ground.
Creighton.
But after sustaining that wound, okay.
She could have been down on her
Yeah,
hands and
she
knees
could have been
too.
down on her hands and knees or just bent over, right? It went into her brain. She's gonna fall to the ground completely.
Don't fall to the
And
ground,
that
Creighton.
puts her in a
Too
position
much.
to get the gunshot wound to the back of the head. I can't really.
The shooter is behind
too
her.
far away for that.
Sorry, I'm gonna go over here, but show me that.
Yeah.
He's crawling
So
around the
last
courtroom. He's
wound
crawling around
was
the courtroom.
going in a downward direction.
He's crawling around the
Entered here,
courtroom.
it's kind of, enough to fracture the skull and go through the back of
Oh my
the
God.
brain.
Oh my God.
brainstem, And then have just a bunch of exit wounds there. So that's, that actually is in kind of a downward direction. So we've got something going upward, we have something going downward, and it only makes sense that the one to the left side of the front occurred first, because if the one to the back of the head she basically was already had injury to the brain sufficient to have killed her. The one to the back of the head that went down was, an additional wound, but the one that entered the left side of the brain was already sufficient to have killed her.
If she had not suffered this wound right here, the one where she's hunched over her own
I've never
hands
seen a
and knees,
prosecutor crawl
if
around
she
on
had
the
not suffered
floor.
that one, would this one to the back of head also
I've
been
seen a
immediately
lot
face
of
to face?
trials.
Either one of them would have been immediately fatal.
I've
That
done
one
a lot of
went through
trials.
the brainstem,
My
the
friends have
brain,
done a lot of
cerebellum,
trials.
that-
I know a
that
lot of
those
criminal
sections of the
attorneys,
brain,
and
their
I have
whole job
never.
is to keep us alive. They keep us breathing and set the cardiac.
It's just, this
rhythm,
testimony is
and,
so
without that, none of us would be-
difficult. It doesn't
In
need
your
to be
opinion, abdomen and
reenacted.
thigh is first. This
That's
one
just
that
me.
went through her breast into her head is after that, and then this one is when she's prone on the ground to the back of the head.
Yes, so I
It's the
do
last one.
think this isn't something that I, immediately realized, but after thinking about it, how, this is gunshot wounds to one person, how do I make sense of this? And this is the most likely logical sequence of shots that she sustained. I also want to mention, remember we had this wound so we have 4 we know about, right? We've got right side of the abdomen, left thigh, the left side of the head in the front. We have breast first, and then we have this last wound while she was prone on the ground, okay, to the back of the head. We also have this additional wound to the left wrist that exited a little bit higher. Now, is it possible that her arm was just somewhere and got shot? Yes. But remember, we know that she must have been in a lot of pain in her abdomen from that shot that went through the abdomen. And if she is bent over, where would her hand likely be? It makes sense she might be bent over with her hand right there. And so if her hand is bent, she's got her hand on her belly, the wound entering the left wrist could exit there before actually going up. So if she's got her hand on her belly, I don't know if that's actually happened, but that's why I described 5 individual gunshot wounds, but because the left wrist could have moved, it could have happened before another one.
And what you just described there with her wrist kind of close to
could have been
her
a through and through.
stomach after suffering that abdominal and thigh wound, that is consistent with the evidence what you just described. Is that correct? That having her hand right there, like
Yeah,
you just described?
that it would be consistent. I can't say 100% that that's what happened, but that is a gunshot wound to the left wrist, and it may have been sustained while she had her hand on her abdomen.
So that's why they said 4 shots, maybe 5, because that through the wrist could have gone into the wrist and then into her body. So with her leaning forward, with the gunshot coming up under her breast, all of us of a certain age feel attacked when she's like, no, because your breast, as you were leaning forward, would cant forward. It's not up against the body because you're upright. It's down a little bit. We all know, So being shot from somebody behind her and going underneath her chest as she's leant forward, then out the top and then into her neck, that makes a lot more sense. That she was leaning forward, because then her chest would be a little bit away from her body because she's bent forward. So
Dr. Riemer, I'm going to show
for all
you
of you,
some
all of
images. If
you
could stand
with the
back that
chest,
way, just
you know
so
what
we
I'm
can
talking
begin.
about. Gravity's mean.
Try to protect these.
It just is what it is. But that's the leaning forward, and that
Yes.
makes sense that the entrance
I'm
wound
gonna
would
show
be
you-
underneath the breast because she's
Good,
leaning
and I'm gonna
forward
kinda give them
and
to
then
you
would
this
go
way. States
up this way
488,
because her head is actually down below
489,
where her chest is because she's bent over, and then And that would have,
490,
she would have fallen after that. She would have fallen after that because of the damage to the brain.
491.
And then the other shot coming from behind her came along her back into her head. So
492,
this all says to me that the person was
493,
behind her or that she was running. So that is hard testimony. One wound had stippling, the others did
495.
not, which means which seems to me to indicate she was trying to get away because those shots are coming from behind. So that makes sense. And I appreciate the pathologist, the ME, for
498.
actually showing how that happened, because that makes more sense. I don't think Creighton needed to be crawling on the floor for that. Maybe the jury's into it. Maybe it's
and
not.
499.
Look,
And do you
man,
generally recognize those
courtrooms are
images?
gross
Yes.
and dirty, and they try not to be, but
Autopsy photos you took of
no touchy. It's
Maggie
just,
Murdaugh.
Yes, these are photographs that I,
and now he's touching
Of,
everything.
Maggie.
He was just on the floor with those hands.
And would those assist you in explaining these injuries to the jury?
Yes.
All right, Your Honor, at this time, I move into evidence.
These are going to be
States
those kinds of
488,
photos.
489, 490, 491, 492, 493, 495, 498, and
Buster is still
499.
sitting right here in the courtroom
No objection, Your Honor.
They're admitted.
for this testimony.
Dr. Riemer, if you could grab the dial stick and come on down here and
It
we'll
is,
try to move through these as expeditiously as I
It
can.
is 5:30 in the East. I'm surprised the court hasn't broken for the day. Truly surprised the court hasn't broken for the day. At some point they will. Cross-examination will be in the morning.
What? Okay.
I know that it's
Okay.
just,
So,
Just stand on this side real quick
yeah,
so that
oh, got it.
they might
Okay,
want to
that's
get through these photos
So,
before giving the jury a break for the
good.
day.
This is
so they
a
can be
a
done with it.
photo of her left thigh. Okay, this is the knee area. And we can see this is kind of on the inside area of the front of the left thigh. And we do have the stippling around it, which tells us that it was shot within a certain, like, relatively close range.
And we have the stippling as you've described. Moving on to
Okay.
States 489. What is
All
this right here?
So you can kind of appreciate this is like the curve of her knees. This is the back of the left thigh where we have an exit wound.
Going on now to States 490. What is this?
Okay, so this is the entrance wound on the right side of the front of the abdomen below the rib cage, close to
Nobody
the
is looking
midline.
at these
And
photos.
we
All
do
of the
have
monitors are
stippling
covered.
here.
The
It's a
jury
little
can see them.
sparser and a little.
Everyone in court can see the jurors' faces.
So that was also close enough, within 3 or so feet, to deposit the stippling, probably a little further back than the one to the left thigh, because there's more tightness of the stippling on the thigh. So if we think of it as kind of going outward, it covers a wider area and it's more sparse on the right side of the abdomen.
Moving on to the next one. What is this right here?
Okay, so this is the exit wound to the left side of the lower back.
Just very quickly, you mentioned that there's stippling on both the abdomen and the thigh, but there's a little bit of
Y'all, they
difference
are
in
going
distance
late.
between
They're
the
just-
two.
we're
Is that
still
correct?
here.
Yes,
I
a
don't know.
small amount. There's stippling on both.
The judge can see the
But
photos on his
the
monitor,
wound
I
to
think.
The thigh is a more tighter, more closely packed bunch of stippling.
It looks like
and
Murdaugh's
doesn't
looking at the jury.
appear as further away from the actual
me, it
defect.
looks like he's
So that
looking at
was
the
a
jury.
little bit closer than to the
But I think they're
the
trying
barrel
to
of
get
the
this
gun was a
done
little closer to her body than.
and then let the
one to
jurors go
right
home
side
for
of
the night before
abdomen, but
cross-examination.
Both of them were within 3 feet.
And those were the only two wounds that you observed with stippling of the ones that you've described. Is that
Yes.
correct? All right. Going on now to this next 492. Tell us what this is, if you would, please.
Okay, so this is a wound to the left wrist, and we can see this is her left thumb, so it's kind of right over there. And it's going through the left wrist, exiting on the soft side of her left
Alec would have
forearm.
seen these photos if he looks.
Moving on
The
now.
defense has them. Whether
to
he looked at them or not,
493.
no one can know for
What
sure.
is that?
I
Yes,
imagine he
so
would have.
there it
wanted to.
is. That's the exit wound. So she had the entrance wound to
So-
the part of
Yeah,
her
the
wrist
judge is
near,
like, I'm good.
near her thumb, and it's
He's
going
watching the jury.
through the left forearm area, exiting at an angle. Right, we know it's kind of exiting at an angle because this defect is oblong. Right, if it's going straight across, we would just have a hole, right? But if something's exiting in an angle, we have more of an oblong exit.
All right.
You know, I know this
Moving
witness
on
talked
to the
about
next
being
one,
from
and
New
again,
York.
This is
Um,
graphic, but can you
Sorry.
You only
tell me
hear
what-
it when she
tell me
says
what this
yeah.
is, and I'm going to move the picture down as you describe it.
oblong.
Okay, so here's her belly
Which
button, just to
We've
give
had a
you
lot of country
reference
accents,
point.
so I'm
And
kind of
this
here
was
for
that
it.
entrance wound on the right side of the abdomen. This is another injury that kind of grazed, kind of abraded the left side of the abdomen before going through her left breast.
All right, and then moving down.
Yeah.
Was that
Okay.
sufficient? I can't really see.
Yeah, so it's fine. Okay, this is a very large destructive hole in the left side of her face, including parts of her left ear. And this makes sense to be a continuation of the one through the left breast. I was confident that this was all the result of a single
And we're
bullet, single
we saw
fired shot. And what we see over here
we saw
is
the
basically a
damaged
bruise
earring in the
from, it didn't actually
in the
go
crime
into
scene
the
testimony,
left
or we
shoulder,
heard
but
about the
as it's
damaged earring
coursing upward
and hair in the
through
crime
the breast
scene.
before it kind of go, and if she's bent over, then it's going to bruise this clavicle area, right? That's that bone right here, before going into the left side of her lower face.
All right, moving on now, and I'm going to go out of order just a bit.
I'm
I'm at
sure others hear her
499.
accent. I've heard it
and
some,
can
but
you,
the oblong was what
Explain.
made me smile.
All right, I'm
Um,
having trouble seeing what this, oh yeah.
Because again, we've
Okay.
gotten so many
Yeah,
different
so
regional accents in this trial. It
At the
just
time I did the
I'm always-
autopsy.
A,
and
I always
have a
enjoy it,
wound to
and
the
B,
left
it's-
wrist and
we've had a lot of
through
different
the
regional
forearm.
accents.
And a wound that's going along the left side of the abdomen. I can't be certain, I can't say with an absolute certainty that her hand was up against her abdomen at the time that the gunshot wound to her torso was going upward. But if her hand was on her abdomen, which she may have had there after getting shot through the abdomen and bending over, this would be a perfect line through the, through the wrist, the left
Oh, yes.
forearm, and
In all of
like,
these trials,
continuing in an upward
I lean in
direction
to how people talk,
fatally entering the left
especially
side
when the
of her-
testimony is difficult.
her head.
Is that an explanation for how the wrist and that gunshot could be
Yes.
related?
So I took a photo of the wrist and the
Same.
scrape along the left side of her abdomen together
I
because it
also can't
occurred to
unhear
me,
Joan Cusack.
based on my experience over decades, that this
Alec
may
cannot see
have
them right now. They are
represented a
covered-
single inflicted
Covered
shot.
by cardboard.
Maybe the one to the wrist was a separate shot. And in my autopsy report, I described it as separate because unless I'm absolutely certain that it's from the same shot, I'm going to describe them separate. But I'm able to tell you, so we have 4 wounds to the body, and it may, 5 wounds, but if we count the left wrist as separate, but if the left wrist was connected to the other one, to one of the others, then it's there's only 4 shots to the body.
And then finally,
That makes sense.
states 498.
Okay, so this is also a very ugly shot. And this is the back of her head. And is a routine matter. She had hair there, but I it wasn't apparent what kind of a wound she had back there. There was blood, but I'll cut away the hair to display the entrance wound. And you can see how long it is. It's long. It's not just a hole going from back to front. It's going in a downward direction like that. And this ammunition breaks up into fragments, and we have like these fragments basically coursing along the top of her back, going through the skin and the fatty tissue beneath in her upper
Wendy
back.
in the chat asked,
So
did they
then
find
this
5 or
one,
6 casings? They found
before it
7
actually hit the back, it
casings.
went through the skull,
7.
the back, right side of the back of her head, as well as the brain stem and cerebellum.
But they
Thank
also
you, Dr. Riemer.
found
We're almost done. If you could have a seat
Oh,
real
good.
quick, and
They
and
also
we'll
found-
conclude the examination.
bullet fragments in the gravel, so it looked like there was at least one that missed and did not hit Maggie, because there were those fragments
Also,
recovered
this
from the
time I
gravel.
would move in to evidence states 501, which is the diagram that Dr. Riemer did of the injuries to Maggie.
I don't know why they didn't just use the diagram
objection.
from her report and why they made a live one in court. It's so confusing to me. I don't know why that was a choice. I hate it. I don't know why it was a choice, but I hate
Dr.
the
Riemer, you
choice.
mentioned that there was a slight difference or a difference in the stippling between the abdominal and the thigh wound, and which one seemed to be a little bit farther away according to your review of the evidence?
Yes, the gunshot wound to the abdomen was slightly further away than the gunshot wound to the left thigh.
And that could be consistent with Maggie and the shooter changing their positions in relationship to one another.
Yeah, nobody,
Someone
people
running
aren't
away.
completely just standing still. It could be that the
Dynamic
shooter,
movement.
was moving closer toward her,
Or she was
a little
moving
bit back
away.
or she could have been moving, or a combination of the two. So I don't know what happened there.
People move.
But I do know that the barrel of the gun was closer at the time it struck her left thigh, because the stippling is
Stippling.
more tight concentrically and doesn't cover as wide an area as the one to the right side of the abdomen.
You've described the injuries to the front, and then the injury to the breast and to the head, and then this final injury to the back of the head. Could that be consistent with the shooter circling his victim?
Yeah, I think that only makes sense if there's some movement on the part of the shooter. We know one
Circling?
the gunshot wound to the front of the body that's going up.
Chilling use of phrase.
If Maggie was bent over, either in air or on the ground, the shot would have been fired from behind her. Right?
Yeah.
From behind her, that's the only way it's going to go up and through the base of the chin area into her head, right? She's bent over. That's the way that it logically makes sense. Nobody's sitting on the floor, and you couldn't do that. And after that shot was sustained, the one that went through the front side.
I
the
hear you.
vertical
It's not a good
one,
time for
and
long
it's
time to
vertical through
change
her
their
body, but most likely
website
occurred
banners.
while
It
she
just
was bent over, or
is.
then that's going to be an
And I don't want to
incapacitating
switch
shot
because then we
because it went
lose the
through her
shot
brain
of Alex's face. So
and
here we are.
caused her to fall to the ground. She's bent over. She gets that shot. She's going to fall face down. And then the last shot to the back of her head is going in the other direction. So that's going downward. So we have one going, so that only can occur if the wound to the left side of the front is somebody shooting from behind her. And then the gunshot wound to the back of the head is going downward while she's on the ground, indicating somebody's standing at at the top of her.
Was there a lot of blood accumulated in Maggie's abdomen?
Not that much. The thing about these wounds is there's so much tissue destruction that blood is just basically in all the tissues. So it's not like sometimes with even a small caliber bullet, there's a single clearly defined wound path, and I can take out blood from the abdomen. But in this case, there was so much tissue destruction. There was a lot of blood in the soft tissues,
There
but
was
not
just so much
necessarily something I can
damage. It
scoop out
wasn't
and measure.
Pooled.
Did
It
the
was
lack of a lot of blood
everywhere. It was a
though in the
fucking
abdomen
disaster.
telling you anything about how rapidly these all occurred together?
Yeah, so if the wound
'Cause there's no
stopped there to the
pooling.
abdomen and somebody walked away. She would have had more bleeding out of those tissues into the abdominal cavity.
In both Maggie
didn't
and
really answer the
Paul, did
question,
you make any
Creighton, but you
observations
didn't
about
follow
their
up with
stomach
it.
contents?
Yes, so part of the autopsy, I'm not just looking at the wounds, I'm examining all of the internal organs. And this is how I knew it went through the pancreas and the kidney, because
She pulled them out and
remember,
looked
it's,
at
I'm
them.
not just looking outside of the body.
No, they
I
take
have
them all
to
out. They
do,
weigh
I
them.
do everything, look
They
at
look
all
at
of the
them.
internal organs
All
and
the organs come
dissect
out.
each one.
Yep.
Um,
Every single
And
one.
when examining the stomach, I will document the contents of the stomach. And
level of
they each
digestion.
had a lot of recently digested food fragments. So, they had a full stomach of food.
Were those stomach contents consistent with one another?
Yeah, they looked identical to each other. They were kind of gray tan, couldn't tell exactly what it was, but it may have included meat. I didn't see any corn or, green beans or anything like that. But whatever it was, they were identical to each other. And I believe she had 600 mLs, which is it's 450 mLs is a pound. So it's like almost 1.5 pounds of food. And he had 500 mLs, which is a little bit more than a pound. But they looked similar,
Dinner.
like they may have shared a meal together.
You testified
Which is
that
consistent
there was no
with
defensive
what we
wounds
know.
on Paul. Did you observe any defensive wounds on Maggie?
No, nothing that would indicate any kind of a defensive wound.
Did you observe any damage
Chad,
to
I
her
see you. Just
fingernails
because
or
Blanca
anything
made
that
green beans
indicated
doesn't
that
mean
she had been in a fight
anybody
with her
ate them.
attacker?
No, that's also part of the autopsy. I'm, in addition to collecting clippings from the fingernails, I look carefully to see sometimes there's a fingernail broken, sometimes there's obvious tissue or blood underneath fingernails, and she didn't have any evidence of
Blanca said she made green beans.
material visually evident underneath her fingernails.
What about her toxicology? Did she have anything in her system? Any drugs or alcohol?
She had caffeine only, the same as Paul, and no other alcohol, no alcohol or other drugs other than caffeine.
Dr. Riemer, in your professional expert opinion, what was the cause of death to a reasonable degree of medical
So we're
certainty for
almost
Paul Murdaugh?
done.
For Paul
We're
Murdaugh,
almost done with her
shotgun
testimony.
wounds. Let me see what exactly I said.
We're almost
I said
done with her
shotgun
testimony.
wounds to head and chest.
And
Shotgun wounds of head and chest.
And what was the manner of death?
Manner of death is homicide, which means death at the hands of another.
So cause and manner of
And
death.
Dr. Riemer, in your expert opinion, what was, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, the cause of death for Maggie Murdaugh?
Maggie Murdaugh died of multiple gunshot wounds.
And what was the manner of death?
Manner of death is homicide, death at the hands of another.
Death at the hands of another.
We know, Creighton. We know. We know.
One final question. Did you recover any fragments from Maggie Murdaugh during your autopsy?
Yes. So this kind of ammunition breaks up into fragments. That's how that's
Yeah, they
the
definitely
nature
didn't sport
of,
around
that
blues for. They definitely
ammunition.
didn't
And
sport
so I
around for 2
recovered
hours and then
multiple,
eat dinner and then get up there.
fragments of
That is not
projectiles.
accurate.
Show you what's been admitted into evidence is States 112, and do you recognize that?
Yes, so those are fragments.
He didn't ask time of
recovered
death.
From Maggie's autopsy.
He's not asked yet. He might not ask. The defense will ask on cross, but he might not ask.
Thank you, Dr. Riemer. Nothing
Nope.
further, Your Honor.
Not going to ask.
Examination.
Cross. Wait, what?
I'm going to have an extensive cross-examination. You want to begin that tonight or first
No.
thing in the morning?
You want to begin in the morning?
Yes.
I think so. I mean,
God, yes.
it's quarter
Oh,
of 6.
God,
It
yes.
could go easily to 7. And I don't think the jury would, at this point, like to stay here. I don't, but
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we will recess for the evening.
That was also
and
strategy.
start
We'll
at
talk about that in a
9:30
bit.
tomorrow morning. Please do not discuss the case.
Well, you could hear the bailiff saying remain in order. The court is not completely excused. The jury's being excused. The judge will resume tomorrow, I think the judge should have called it without giving Dick the opportunity to be the good guy for the jury. He's like, the jury doesn't want to do this. I sure don't. But Dick loves a moment to get to grandstand. But I agree with him. I 100% agree with him. I agree with him all. Yes, the jury needs a break. Let them break for the night.
Doctor, you may step down. Please do not discuss your testimony with anyone.
Just give them a minute. Give them a night to breathe and hug their families. And then,
if everyone will be seated.
I want to know what else the court has to say. Oh, Dick's definitely a politician. He takes those little opportunities. Not all lawyers do that, but he takes those little opportunities.
As we anticipate other witnesses tomorrow, are there any matters that the court needs to consider overnight regarding any matters of controversy or in controversy or outstanding issues regarding any witness?
Shockingly, no, Your Honor. Not on part of the defense.
Oh,
Not on part of the state. The new information from GM we addressed this morning, and obviously the defense has that. And both sides are analyzing that, but I'm not, aside from that right now, I'm not aware of any specific issues the court needs to address.
The only query I will have, because
You said
we're
no.
again trying to arrange for people
Forfeit.
to fly in, and
You
Monday
forfeit. You
is
said
not going
no.
to be a court day, is does the Attorney General have any prognostication on when he might finish his case? I think with the GM material, it will affect it somewhat. I just don't know how much.
Your Honor, we're still on target for Wednesday. That GM material is just confirmatory of the timeline that both sides have had, and it's being incorporated into testimony. We have a custodian coming, which I don't imagine will be an extensive witness. We're still on target for Wednesday, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll be in recess to 9:30.
all right. We are in recess till Monday. G says hi to the chat. So hi to the chat from G. I'm going to keep this up a little if we can to watch them exiting the court, because there's always shenanigans that happen as they are exiting court. So I wish they would just go to the one feed, but I always enjoy seeing, Alec telling the bailiffs not to shoo him along and making sure that he hasn't put his Tic Tacs in his coat pocket, because he keeps trying to take everything with him. So no, they're going to be recessed till tomorrow. Did he say till Monday? What did the court say? The court's tired too. They're in recess till tomorrow. No, they'll be back tomorrow morning. Did I say Monday? Is today Monday? I don't know. The court said recess. He meant until tomorrow. If I said it wrong, it's because I'm the worst and I'm tired and I don't know what day of the week it is. They'll be back tomorrow at 9:30. So, all right. Alec is heading out. Heading out. They always grab his books from him. They handcuffed him and put him in transport. Court will be back tomorrow at 9:30 Eastern time. I will be back here at 9 or 8. So they'll be back at 9:30 Eastern time. I will be back here at 8:25 Central Standard Time. All right. So they are done for the day. And that is the end of day 16 of court. And we got to the testimony of the medical examiner, talking about the cause and manner of death. Of course, there at the end, the prosecution did not ask about the time of death. You guys know I've been critical of the prosecution style. I was a prosecutor for a really long time. So there are things that just rub me the wrong way in all of it. Crawling around on the floor, not something I ever want to do in a courtroom. Courtrooms are disgusting. I've had coworkers catch MRSA. I've been exposed to everything you can imagine, including tuberculosis in a courthouse. Courthouses are just hotbeds of every kind of germ you can imagine. So to crawl around on the floor and then touch everything, I just hate it so much. I hate it so much. But Creighton wants to do it. So whatever. If you want to crawl around on the floor, big guy, you go right ahead. Never, ever, never, ever. The only time I ended up not on my feet in a courtroom was when I tripped and landed on a defendant. And that was absolutely mortifying. Just mortifying. Mortifying. Hated it the most. All right. Alex getting ready to exit court. I'm going to go ahead and answer questions. It's just, I'm not here for it. I'm not here for it. but they've got their own style and they do the things they're going to do. The chat saying, bring the Purell. Yeah, absolutely. Bring the Purell. Bring the Purell. I know you guys are right. In the chat, you're like, the lawyer who was worried about jurors being released for the vid then was just crawling around on the floor in front of the jury box. It's an excellent point. It's an excellent point. All right. So they are transporting Alec Murdaugh. I am going to answer questions. It is time. It is time. Oh, no, I need to do a summary. Hold on. I got to do a summary. We got to do a summary. Hold on. Hold on. Summary first, and then questions. All right. So this afternoon, we finished a very, I thought, very good cross-examination of the DNA expert. The defense attorney who's been doing the cross-examinations of the expert, I have found to be the most easy to listen to and the most linear and clear on the defense team. I have very much liked that defense attorney vis-a-vis Poot and Jim Griffin, and I have liked his cross-examinations, but this cross-examination I found to be very effective. Now, half of the chat was like, oh shit, and half of the chat was like, bored, what? So whether the jury will be like, damn, or whether the jury will also be like, okay, DNA, what? Blood spatter, what? We just don't care anymore, is up to the jury. And it might be a mixed bag. That's why they all deliberate together. It might be a mix of both. We're just not going to know, and that's okay. So with that, then we went into the medical examiner's testimony. The medical examiner did the autopsies on both of these victims, talked about the catastrophic injuries. The court actually ended up taking a break while they were covering the injuries to Paul Murdaugh, which we know are catastrophic. The judge, when they came back, rather, the prosecutor went into the medical examination of Maggie, the amount of shots, the direction of those shots, and what those things tell us about the way that the victims were moving. Now, it's interesting because we got to the end of is with Maggie, is she being circled by the person who's shooting her, like in a semicircle? Is that the direction that Maggie is moving, or that the shooter was moving, which is very interesting. And we know with Paul, he has no defensive wounds, no protection wounds, and that the first shot was within 3 feet because of the stippling with that shotgun. So somebody was very close to him with a shotgun, and he wasn't moving for another weapon or moving away. And then it seems that he looked towards the direction of that first shot to him and then was shot. And that is the shot that dislodged the back of his skull. So that is the testimony the jury heard today. We will start with cross-examination. A lot of questions came in about whether or not the defense can have their own medical examiner. They can. Did they do that in this case? Unclear. Could they have? Yes. I have not gone and looked for the defense witness list. I can go find it. So could they have someone who contradicts it? Maybe. Do they need that in this case? I just don't know. It's uncontroverted that they were shot and killed this way. There's no controversy about that. So I don't know if the defense should waste their time or energy other than saying, this is horrible. This is awful. Somebody did a horrible thing, but that somebody's not Alec Murdaugh. And not even fighting with this. I imagine they should do a pretty quick cross-examination. And the cross-examination will be, or should be, could this have happened? Could that have happened? Instead of having it be, could somebody have been shooting from far away? Could there be two shooters? They're going to ask those types of things. And she's going to be like, there's two guns. It could, I can't say whose hands those guns were in. All I can say is this and that. Dick said an extensive cross, but it shouldn't be. I think Dick wanted to be done for the day, even if it's not going to be an hour-long cross. He said extensive, but an hour is not that extensive, and it shouldn't be that much. They should just let it go. I know he said extensive. He wants to be done for the day. I don't think it will actually be that extensive. I don't. I just think he wanted to be done for the day, and I don't blame him. I want to be done for the day too. And for Dick, for that, I am thankful for Dick, because Dick said, Your Honor, do we have to start now? It'll be extensive. It might not actually be. So Holly Dermond said, no time of death. Oh, wait, I didn't finish summary. That was my summary. And we didn't end with cross-examination. That will resume in the morning. So cross-examination will resume tomorrow, Tuesday. So with that, let's go to questions. Let's go to questions. So Holly had said in Super Chat, no time of death. That's what I was waiting to hear. I imagine that'll be one of the first questions in cross-examination. Here's what I suspect. I suspect that the time of death is very broad, and they are going to give a range, and that range goes later than the prosecution's theory of the case. The prosecution's theory of the case is these deaths happened right around 8:49, 8:50 p.m. That is it. That is all. If the time of death from the medical examiner is between 8 and 10 p.m., it doesn't really help the prosecution much, and I don't think they need to elicit that, so they're going to let the defense elicit it instead of even dignifying it. And so I suspect that's what we will get. Ramona said, then why was Maggie facing the kennels? I need the overview again to know if Maggie was coming out from around the hangar, or if the shooter shot Paul and then went around the hangar and Maggie was coming back round towards the kennels. But the prosecution did say they're going to have a timeline witness, and their timeline witness should go through that as well. It's just as likely that the shooter came across Paul from the house, came across Paul, shot Paul, and went around the back and rounded on Maggie. Vicky said, your son is so cute, EDB. Thank you. He is a delight. I would love it if, in addition to saying bring the jury, the judge said yeet the jury when dismissing them. Yes, yeet the jury. We did change voir dire to seat and yeet this trial, so I'm here for that. Siggy said attorneys are in full razzle dazzle mode. Yeah, I'm not going to say I never had moments of dramatics. I had moments of dramatics, both with and without a jury. I did. I absolutely did. There were days. There were days that were very dramatic. I can be very dramatic. I didn't tend to be very dramatic in homicide cases. They felt so heavy to me. It just didn't feel like you needed it. What happened is heavy. What happened is fucking horrible. There's no need for dramatics and just like, I don't know. It was just me. Maybe it was just me. But I got very dramatic, especially in my paper cases. I love paper cases. And I would get very like, and this check went to this bank account? Because otherwise your jury falls asleep. The jury's not falling asleep listening to the medical examiner. They're trying not to cry out loud. Do jurors get support after this trial ends? I imagine they would need it. In the UK, we have started doing this. It depends on the jurisdiction, and it really goes jurisdiction by jurisdiction depending on the resources. That was not something that was available in my jurisdiction when I was working as a prosecutor. It is something that is needed. The attorneys also need support, though they need to seek their own. So is it something that needs to happen? Yes. Does it always? Not always. Samantha said, I'm a little behind live, but the random break for the judge could be the fact that he just lost his own son very recently. It could be very different circumstances for this judge, but his son did recently pass from a heart attack, and he made clear he would go on with this trial. So we'll see. I think this judge has been lovely. I think he has definitely given hints when he has been frustrated with the attorneys, like telling the prosecutors more than once, y'all are having your own private little conversation as a hint, like hint, hint, bring it back round. Like bring it back round. Stop it. Stop sitting over there and having your own little cutesy convo. Bring it back. Stop going and standing by the corner. But it could be. If Paul arrived at Moselle at 7:30, how did him and Alec sport around for 2 hours? They didn't. And that is very much not true. Thank you for hanging in on this long day. All of them feel long in this trial, but we definitely have some interesting moments. The way Maggie was killed, it sounds so personal. Am I wrong? I think the stippling can make it feel that way just because the stippling is so close. It's just so close to people. So it's just very, very close. So with that, let's see. Please, everyone, self-care after this testimony. Absolutely, which is why we put up warnings too. Nothing in this courtroom has been normal. Facts. Why am I not surprised the prosecutor is crawling around on the floor? Also facts. And there were some comments that were like, Emily, I bet you have never. Oh, never. Oh, never. Also, I was in trial in heels. There is no way I'm going to try to get my ass back up off the floor in heels in my suit. It is never happening. I didn't like, you have to do a bunny dip in court to get things under your desk. Like, I'm not putting my ass in the air in court. Like, it's a bunny dip in heels, like trying to get things out of my box. Or I would ask for my detective to do it because I didn't want to be like butt in the air, bending over, digging under a table for things. No. I very much aware. There would never be Emily crawling around on the floor. If a pen fell on the floor in court, I'm going to let it go. I have an entire case. It's just not happening. It's just never, ever happening. It's just never happening. Ever. Question, will the defense have an ME to combat this analysis? I don't know if they'll bring in their own pathologist. If I was the defense, I wouldn't even bother with it. The pathology is what it is. If I was the defense, I would ask very few questions and be like, whoever did this, it was horrible. Wouldn't you agree? And then move on. There's nothing to get from the ME. We'll see what they say. They're going to ask time of death. They're going to ask how specific time of death is. They'll probably ask if there's two shooters. And maybe that's about it. Matt Bond, here's where the body language experts would help. Not admissible in court, but always interesting for us to watch as entertainment. Her going through these awful injuries isn't going to help him with the jury. It's not going to help anybody with the jury. But I think I'll just arguendo. It can go both ways. Because the jury can take a look at this and say, I can't even imagine how someone could do this. Or the jury could take a look and say, hey, I can see how after what happened to Paul, he was so rattled, he couldn't well shoot Maggie. And that's why there's so many shots everywhere, because he was so rattled about, I did him so bad. There's an argument both ways. With almost everything in this trial, I can argue it both ways. So, did Creighton the crab just demonstrate execution shot? Something like that. He did something like that. What is there to cross about an ME? Isn't this just, it is what it is? I think they're going to cross, as I previously said, time of death. And if there's other interpretations like, oh, well, the body didn't have to be this way, it could be this way. Could there be two shooters? I think you keep it to that. Just, Desiree said he's crawling around on the floor just days after the other lawyers shook the chemicals from the raincoat all over the floor. Yeah. And then was dumping evidence into the trash can. It was just, and just, I wanted to yell, Creighton, get your clam off the floor, but it's not appropriate during that part of the testimony. But that's what I was thinking. Like, get your clam off the floor. Emily and the floor are never, ever getting back together. No, never. No, never, ever. Ever. Getting back together. Mason asked, what are the qualifications of a timeline witness? It'll probably be one of the lead investigating officers that will put together an actual timeline. So one of the lead investigators. Alec Murdaugh seems to project real grief when listening about Paul, but his grief for Maggie feels forced. I don't know, man. I don't know. I just don't know. So how can her own son be there with no tears, no emotion? Shock, knowing that you're on TV, knowing that because now everybody's dissecting Buster's behavior. And he knows that. He's aware because half the media is reporting he got admonished for flipping off Tinsley, but then he's like chewing on the side of his finger. So I just don't know. I don't know. So, Mickey asked, why is the blood spatter expert so terrible? I covered the motion, the blood spatter expert that the state has used. There are inconsistencies in reports. There were like experiments in the garage. It's just so fucking bizarre. And I read the defense's report and went, yep, that's a whole ass disaster. They shouldn't introduce it. It will introduce more doubt to their case, I think. Question, Who was fighting to get in the blood spatter? Also, what was the 74 and all calculations about? I got so lost. Love from Bulgaria. Well, love to Bulgaria. The prosecution has not sought to admit the blood spatter expert, and there's a motion pending to keep the blood spatter expert out and a motion for sanctions with regard to the blood spatter expert. So the defense kind of boxed the prosecution in today in their cross-examination, because if the prosecution seeks to admit it, the court might just keep it out anyway. They haven't cut much out, so maybe not. But if the prosecution doesn't seek to admit it, then it's like, oh, but they did blood spatter and they didn't tell us about it. And then that leaves a question mark in the eyes of the jury as well. What was the 74 calculations about? So the defense was asking about all of the cuttings from the shirt tested for blood with hemotrace. And all 74 of those clippings were tested with hemotrace, and all of them came back negative for blood on the shirt, even though the LCV showed blood on the shirt. So it's fighting over whether there's blood on the shirt or not. And of the hemotrace, 74 were tested and 0 came back. Going to insinuate it's Bubba's chicken. I mean, the Bubba slander did stop a little bit today, but we'll see. Who cares? This wasn't the shirt he wore to kill. I don't think that that's been determined yet, but I think for us, it's been determined that this is clearly a changed shirt if he's the one that killed them. But if he touched them in this shirt, why is there no blood? And they didn't really ask the coroner about how much blood there would be on the ground and how long it would take to coagulate. I was kind of surprised by that, but maybe they just don't want to. Jessica said, as a layperson, the defense just put in my head that there is DNA and high velocity on the shirt, so AM is guilty. That can't be the plan, right? No, the plan is, look, the prosecutor's hiding something from you. The plan is, you haven't heard these experts yet, so the prosecution's hiding something for you. But this is a fishing shirt, so he could just have fish blood on it. Question, if new evidence comes out, if he has been acquitted, can the state retry him, or does that fall under double jeopardy? That's exactly what double jeopardy is. If he's acquitted, he's acquitted. If he's acquitted and then he admits it, he's still acquitted. They can't try him again. If he's admitted and then says, I hired someone to do it, he's still acquitted. They can't try him again. He could be sued civilly by Maggie's family, but that's about it. Will they release the unredacted stuff eventually? They've been releasing some of it. So they have been releasing it slowly. Sure seems like he had stuffed all that info into his head and dumped it onto the cop in that video of the first response and on the 911 call. And again, if the prosecution is smart, they will argue the reason he mentions the boat case first is because it's what is on his mind most. Missed GM drama. Will new evidence extend the trial? It shouldn't extend it much, but I'm very excited to see it. Very excited to see it. And I want them to question the fuck out of this witness. Why didn't you turn this in sooner? Family Tech said maybe he lied because he was getting liposuction. I think that's the only reasonable response. For those of you in the chat that don't know what this is a reference to, I'll let the other law nerds educate you. That Sara said, I think Alec also used the hose to rinse himself off immediately before going to the house to shower. It explained a lot and why there's so much water. And that, I think the prosecution will argue. There's also a skinning shed right there. Nobody has told us if the skinning shed has, like, I don't know, a fucking sink. Because if you're skinning deer or things, you're going to want to wash off. So nobody even seems to have searched the skinning shed. Everybody just mentions it like it's there and then ignores it. Is it just me, or does she kind of sound like the principal from School of Rock? Like, I love it, but can't unhear it. And we've heard a lot of comparisons to the Emmy's voice. Jennifer said, I have heard of cases where someone kills family members to save them from the shame, hardship of financial issues and scandals like this. It doesn't have to be a financial motive. I mean, it can be a discovery motive. The only thing is the jury shouldn't be left speculating. The prosecution should make that clear. Kelly asked a great question in the chat. Question, is a hung jury an acquittal? No. A not guilty verdict is an acquittal. A hung jury is a hung jury, and you can try that case again. And you can try multiple. You can try multiple hung juries. They can hang and hang and hang, and you can still try it. At some point, it becomes a diminishing return, but you can. So, question, I was catching up with the trial and her jurors don't get a transcript. That's true. A few years ago, I learned I had the start of hearing loss, and now I use subtitles for everything. What would happen if I was called to be a juror? It depends on the jurisdiction, Jess. They can offer assisted listening devices, and that's about it. Or Make sure that you're sat where you can see. But if you cannot hear and assisted listening devices do not help, you do not get transcripts. You have to hear and evaluate the testimony. So it just depends on the jurisdiction as to what they do. But they really do, in the jurisdictions I've practiced in and where my friends practice, try to make sure that people can engage with jury duty and make it accessible, and make sure that it's accessible. But they will absolutely ask. And normally when hearing is a concern, because it's a very common concern, they will have a juror sit through voir dire and ask, did you understand what we were saying here? If you sit in the seat, can you see the witness stand and understand us here? And make sure that the witness is comfortable. Some people want to be on jury duty and some people are like, no, I still can't understand. I would prefer to be excused. So it just depends. Sarnad X3. I'm sure I pronounced that terribly, but thank you. I worked as a coder for pathology. The doctors were one insane sweet old man and 4 not sweet ones. One grabbed my wrist to see a tattoo. Freaked me out. Yeah, you do. Look, pathologists are their own bunch. And there are some that are personable and there are some that do not want to talk to people and prefer being left alone with their lab work. We just found the smartest woman in the room. She was very, very good. Can the witnesses bring their own demonstratives if they're asked by the state and they were shown to the defense? I mean, they would be shown to the defense before they'd be shown to the jury. But yes, they can. I don't know why that choice was made. I still don't like it. When the Emmys do their autopsy, they do a full chart. Why do it live in front of the jury? Because if I'm the defense, I'm going to pull up the chart they did live and the chart they did before and said, which one's right? If there's any inconsistency, even a small little variance, I don't like it at all. It just doesn't make any sense. Katie said, my all-dressed chips just came. Oh my God, they're so good. Try them immediately. They're delish. COVID concerns at courtroom. This seems risky. Yeah, on the floor seems real weird to me. The purpose of this demo is to provoke a reaction from Alec Murdaugh. It's working. That might be the point. Was Alec Murdaugh drug tested? We have heard nothing about that. They barely took his phone. They didn't want to do a search warrant because they didn't want to displace his family and friends that were there. So I highly doubt he was tested. This is going to be hard. It's okay to step away. A good reminder to everyone in the chat. Thank you for everyone that's still here. If I were on this jury, would if I were on jury, this would make me not like the prosecution. I may not like AM, but this feels cruel to have her redraw these in front of him. Fair. It depends on which way the jury is leaning at this point, or if they're leaning any particular way. But they also want to understand, and maybe it helps. Kim Chi said, don't come for me, but I don't think he did it, and we will get answers for all our questions when it's the defense turn, but then who did? And this is a good question, and nobody's going to come for you. We're in the middle of a trial where things still seem very unclear to me. We're not done yet. When the state rests their case, I really hope it's more clear. Michelle M said, could this be requested by the witness, the visual aid? She's a professor, and this is very professor-like. It could be. It could be the way she prefers to do things. Why can't we see the actual pictures? No, those are under seal. They should be under seal. And I said it earlier, and I will say it again. I think there's a lot that goes to balance dignity of victims, what the public doesn't need to know, and transparency in the courts. These don't need to be public. There's no controversy in this case that Maggie and Paul were murdered. They were murdered. There's no controversy about the fact that one was shot with a rifle and one was shot with a shotgun. None at all. It's who was holding those weapons. That is the controversy in this case. And the public having access to that doesn't make sense. Though Lilac Gamer asked in the chat, what about the autopsy diagrams? Those at some point should be unsealed. Those should not stay sealed. But there is nothing in those photos that needs to be available to the public. This isn't a controversy. So I feel like the questioning should have been over a long time ago. I'm sleeping over here. This was from much earlier in the day. Paul knew who shot him because of how close they got to him to shoot, in my opinion. So I agree with you. Does that mean it's Alec, or does that mean Alec knew? I don't know. If he changed his clothes before calling 911, that it would explain the lack of blood on him and the housekeeper's testimony. It would. I think he probably changed his clothes before he went to his mother's. but he doesn't say that he did. From the video with the leaning tree, at some point he changed his clothes. I don't think he knew the leaning tree video existed until later. And we hear that there's a video and we hear him ask Blanca to change or to remember differently what shirt he was wearing after he's confronted with the tree video. And then he goes, oh shit, there's a video of me in a different shirt. I never said I changed my clothes. This might be why they want him to testify, to start to explain those things. I think it's a terrible idea. I think Alec thinks he can talk his way out of anything, but he might end up talking his way into a conviction that would be harder for the state to get otherwise. I don't know, man. I don't know. KCL, why is this info presented? It's an element of the crime to prove that the victims died. So they have to show that. They have to show that they died. But they also need to explain some of the things like how. Isn't it more helpful to y'all, chat, let me know. Isn't it more helpful to you to know that there is stippling in those wounds, that they were both shot initially from within 3 feet? Doesn't that change what you think about this case? And it detracts from the defense argument. Couldn't there just be people in the trees just shooting down on them? No, there can't be. They're 3 feet away. It's not possible that there's just some rando in the trees with the family weapons. Not at all. So it helps. Some of these things very much help the jury understand. Creative Chaos said, crawling, New Mexico versus Cummings. The prosecutor had a gun and was wrestling with the defendant to show what he did. Defendant was acquitted. It was very entertaining because the prosecution sucked. That seems terrible. Was it the defendant must have been on the stand, but that seems like a terrible plan. Look, demonstratives, you have to know how it's going to go. You don't ask someone to put on a glove that's leather and has been soaked in blood in front of a jury where you can't make them do it and they're in control of the exhibit. It's a terrible fucking idea. You never ask defendants to participate in show and tell with you when they're on the stand. It's a terrible, terrible idea. Kimberly said maybe he was stressed and angry and unexpectedly snapped and shot Paul and then felt he had to shoot Maggie. Speculative, only thing that makes sense. The jury's going to have to decide all of these things together. Questions. Is it true that after retrying hung jury multiple times, eventually the judge would say can't retry unless there's new evidence? Depends on the judge and the jurisdiction and depends on how many times. It also depends on how hung the jury was. If the jury is hung 11-1 for guilt, the judge is going to be like, do what you got to do. If the jury's hung 11-1 NG, they're going to have a little bit more questions about, are we sure we're going forward with this? Jurors deserve to have an option to look or look away. I don't think anyone's going to make the jury look if they are just like, yo, I'm out. They're not going to be like, excuse me, juror number 2, I need you to do this. Kelly B said, I refuse to dissect a frog in science class. I don't think I'd be able to handle this at all. Poor Paul. I know he had behavioral problems, but still no kid deserves this. No one deserves it. People shouldn't be killed by other humans. Like, just don't kill people. Do you agree? Fred agrees. Fred's here. Fred's like, I agree. Hi, buddy. Okay, you can't start drooling. This cat. Y'all, I have never owned a cat that drools when he purrs, but this mischief and mayhem. You don't even want to look. You're not even going to say hi to the chat. So rude. So rude. This mischief managed drools when he purrs. Sarah Bird said, I'm very thankful for the role the ME play. I'm sure their job is hard, and this aspect of their job might provide closure to them and next of kin. I agree. It is a hard job, but I find, or at least all the pathologists I worked with, liked being able to put the puzzle pieces together to provide answers to what happened based on the clues they are left. There are those who are just called to this work and they love doing this work. Diane said this could be me reaching to blame him, but can this testimony explain why the body cam footage, he kept asking if they were really gone? Did he see PM maybe fighting to stay alive? This is awful. He definitely didn't see Paul fighting to stay alive after that second shotgun blast. While Paul is getting shot, what was Maggie doing or vice versa? She would have heard the shot, right? I think Maggie would have absolutely heard the shotgun and maybe come around to see as somebody's coming around behind her. It's very possible, but we don't know. AM's attorney not giving any comforting gestures to their client during this testimony seems off and telling to me. Is that common for the defense? I've seen defense attorneys comfort their clients, but I also don't focus a lot on that side of the table when I'm in court myself because you're all kind of lined up. But I've definitely seen defense attorneys and in the cases we've covered, interact with their client. I think it just depends. And I think it's odd. I mean, I think it's particularly odd from this defense because when Poot got up at the beginning of his opening, what Poot said was, hey, I'm honored to represent Alec. And then they're not sitting there acting like they're there to help. Or maybe Alec doesn't want them to. Like, let the jury just see it. It could be strategy. But they're friends. But it could be strategy. So, I don't know. Blood spatter sitch may be to prove too clean. We know what the blood spatter expert's going to testify to, and it's a mess. Again, I've got a video covering that motion from the defense. If we need a mental break, yeeted Spears. Oh, Bethany, thank you so much for this. But also, God damn it, yeeted. Look, I've got podcasts lined up and I'm behind. I'm running late this week on the podcast to cover all the stuff going on in Rust. I don't have time for yeeted to get up to nonsense. Katya said, imagine he is innocent. I mean, we're there. We're at the presumed innocent. We haven't closed any of the evidence yet. No matter that he's a creep, he definitely stole from his clients. This must be terrible for him. Even if he didn't, this is terrible for him. It's terrible. It's terrible either way. Teresa Stubbs said, my best friend was gunned down by an ex with a shotgun to the shoulder and face. I'm sorry. Her poor teenage kids witnessed this and tried to save her, and he had zero blood on him. He didn't even hug his wife and cry as he held her. That's awful. And I'm sorry for that experience. It definitely changes the way you see things. And I hope those kids are able to heal from witnessing that. Possible motive for murders. They died before grandpa. I don't know, but they did. They did, in fact, die before grandpa. I assume AM heard these details before. Yes, he wouldn't have heard them. He would have seen them in all the paperwork. The defense has all of it. And you can see him very actively carrying those case files in and out of court every day. If he's read them, I don't know, but I imagine that he would. So how do you feel this witness is going? Do you think the jury will be engaged? How have you seen guilty people act when an autopsy is being presented? Again, when I'm the one in court questioning, I don't really notice exactly what the defendant is doing because I'm looking at the jury and the witness, not the defendant. But normally there's not much reaction to medical examiner testimony except from the jury. And I think the jury will be fascinated. They want answers too. They've sat through this trial day in and day out with cell phone plots and checks and somebody picking up every single little casing. And this is finally the witness saying, this is what it means. So we'll see. Showered in the cottage next to the kennels, possibly. We did hear about that cottage from Nolan Tootin, who was staying at the cottage. Maybe that's where Nolan Tootin's DNA came from. Maybe that's why they called him as a witness. Other than the bundles of cash, maybe that's why they called him as a witness. Maybe they did. Maybe they did. Betty C. said, I was reading on Twitter the defense calls to plan Alec. I don't know why they would signal that other than to try to throw the prosecution off their game. Look, we saw this in Depp v. Heard. We saw the PR and the media leaks kind of overtime in Depp v. Heard. I don't know if that's true. I don't doubt that it's being reported. I don't know if it's accurate in what's being reported because we know that Dick Harpootlian does work well with the media, and this might be to change or try to get the prosecution to change their strategy, which would be smart. I will not believe that Alec Murdaugh is testifying until they call his name during the defense case and he takes the witness stand because it's just such a terrible idea. But trying to get the prosecution off their game through media leaks wouldn't surprise me at all. Not at all. Stippling in both initial wounds with different weapons for each victim, necessitating a change in weapon if one shooter was the big open question for me. Yeah. It's a big open question for me too, unless you've got Maggie coming around to be like, seriously, what the fuck? And Maggie then walking up on the person who did it, which she's not walking up on a stranger. She's not letting a stranger get that close to her, especially after she had just heard gunshots. So Sammy Sung said coroner can tell how long they can, but they weren't asked. STG Alec nodded when he heard Maggie was bent over. Interesting. Your lighting is great on your face. Thank you. It's trying to keep lighting on. I have been going back and forth with lights. This one is an Elgato. It's the flat Elgato light. I forget the exact name of it. The Elgato key light, something like that. I need to put it in my Amazon store. I try to do that as best I can. Question, will the defense have their own ME? Oh, we talked about that. I don't know if it would serve them at all. Like, I don't know. It's the 2 weapons and short amount of time that's throwing me off unless he had it slung over his shoulder. Always possible. Both weapons are missing. Nathan Tootin was the witness. Nolan Tootin is his brother. Did I get my Tootins mixed up? I might have. My brain is very tired. My brain is very, very tired. I think it's a leak that they're thinking about putting him on the stand, and I think it's a leak to maybe try to shift what the prosecution's going to do. I don't think that's a bad tactic. I just think putting him on the stand is a terrible idea. You have nothing to gain. He has nothing to gain and everything to lose from testifying. Truly, everything to lose from testifying. All right, let's get to 1 or 2 more and then wrap this up. Because why? Because tired. Because absolutely tired. Donna Walker, thank you so much for the super sticker. If I missed that earlier and didn't pull it up, thank you. I see it. I know I miss stuff. It absolutely happens every single time I stream, but thank you. It's always good to be here with you all. I don't know if AM is innocent, but I don't think his lack of emotions is definitive of guilt. I don't think so either. It's the change in behavior in the interviews that I normally look at, and his courtroom behavior sometimes seems exaggerated, but he's a lawyer and all the lawyers' courtroom behavior seems exaggerated. So it's that. So anyone, where is the 3rd video y'all talking about? The newly released and redacted body cam video is on Law and Crime, and I'm sure it will be on every other network soon. I think there is here. Let me go take a look real quick. I think there is another one that was released today. So let me go look real quick. God, every time I go to look at what's on the live, these Elon Musk like scam videos are just absolutely everywhere. You would have thought that YouTube would have gotten that like sorted, but they still end up there, and it makes it harder to find other things. So let me go look real quick and see if there's anything else, because we got the body cam. I can't type. We got the body cam released earlier and we did that. Let's see. I know you guys sent me the other car video, the second car video. Okay, that's what we're going to look at now. I'm just going to pull it up. This is an hour long, so we're not going to break it down today. We will break it down in separate stuff. This is his car interview from the second interview. This is on June 10th, before he finds out that his father passes. This is the blue and white striped shirt. This is not the Vineyard Vine shirt that he told Blanca to say he was wearing. This is not a Vineyard Vine shirt. This is some other kind of golf shirt. So that is up, but that is an hour of video that I am not going through right now. Alec Murdaugh on his knees getting chicken out of dog's mouth and then shot the family. I don't know. He's too clean, unless he cleaned himself up, because from all of my remembrances, law enforcement said that all the dogs were in their kennels when they showed up. And when law enforcement shows up, Bubba's not running around. And Alec never said, oh, my dog was out going crazy and I had to put him away. It would have been noted if Bubba had been out when Alec arrived home, or should have been noted. So someone put Bubba away because Bubba was out running around when the kennel video is filmed by Paul. So with all of that, thank you for being here. Thank you for being law nerds. I will be back tomorrow at, what time did I say? 8:25-ish with coffee. 8:25-ish for day 17 of this 3-week trial. You guys, Thursday's an early day. We're going to get ready. We're going to get through it. I've got to go record a podcast and a quick bits for y'all. So I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to go check in on my kiddos first, but then get back to work. I will see all of you soon. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being law nerds. You're the best. You rock. Bye, guys. You can find all the Law Nerd goodies at lawnerdshop.com. Connect with me on social media at the Emily D. Baker. And don't forget to check out my podcasts, The Emily Show, and the new podcast, Quick Bits, summarizing everything I talk about on my Tuesday and Thursday live streams. You know, when you only have time for just the quick bits.